The Winchester felt heavier than usual. Elias Mercer stood on his porch, watching the wagon struggle up the ridge through February sleet. 45 years old, weathered like the fence posts surrounding his land, he'd learned long ago that unexpected visitors meant one thing out here: trouble. The ranch sat isolated on Black Hollow Ridge, 3 hours hard ride from anything resembling civilization. That's exactly how Elias wanted it. 12 years he'd lived this way, alone except for cattle, wind, and memories he worked like hell to forget. The wagon came closer. Elias's jaw tightened. He could make out details now: patched canvas top, wheel that wobbled worse than a drunk on Saturday night. And driving it, a woman. His finger didn't move to the trigger. Not yet. But it didn't move away either. The wagon crested the final rise and stopped 30 yards out, respecting the invisible line every person in Wyoming territory understood. You didn't approach a man's house uninvited, not if you valued breathing. The woman climbed down slow, hands visible, smart. She wore a coat that had seen better years and a hat that probably belonged to a man once. Behind her, 3 faces peered from the wagon bed, 2 boys and a girl, ranging maybe 5 to 12 years old. Elias felt his stomach drop. Kids. "That's far enough," he called out. His voice carried flat across the frozen ground. "Ranch isn't hiring, trading posts back in Black Hollow. You lost your way." The woman didn't flinch. She stood there in the sleet, water already darkening her shoulders, and looked at him with eyes that had seen things, bad things, the kind that left marks you couldn't wash off. "Mara Quinn," she said, her voice cut through the weather clean and direct. "I'm here about the notice." Elias blinked. "What notice?" "The one you posted 3 weeks ago at Brennan's trading post. Cook wanted. Must endure solitude. Ask few questions." She paused. "I can do all 3. The Winchester lowered an inch, not from trust, from surprise. He'd posted that notice in January when Tom Brennan mentioned Elias looked like death warmed over. Working a ranch alone meant 16-hour days and meals that consisted of whatever required the least effort: coffee, hardtack, jerky that could break teeth. "I asked for a cook," Elias said slowly. "Not a—" "Family," Mara finished. "I know what you asked for, but here's what you're getting. I cook better than anyone you'll find within 200 miles. I work hard, keep my business private, and won't complain about conditions." "And them?" Elias gestured toward the wagon with his rifle barrel. "My children, Caleb, Josie, and Finn. They come with me or we leave together. No negotiation on that point." The sleet intensified, turning the air gray. Elias had built his entire life around one principle: keep people out. After Sarah left, after the business with the Kearney brothers nearly got him killed, after learning the hard way that trust was just weakness wearing a smile, he'd sworn himself to solitude. This woman stood there asking him to break that oath. 3 kids. 3 more mouths to feed, 3 more bodies making noise, 3 more reasons things could go wrong. Every instinct screamed to send them away. "Can you bake bread?" The question came out before Elias could stop it. Mara's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. The kind that makes hard men remember they're human. Silence stretched between them. Behind Mara, the oldest boy, Caleb, watched Elias with suspicion that mirrored Elias's own. The girl, Josie, stared with unsettling directness. The youngest, Finn, clutched something wooden against his chest. Elias thought about the notice. He'd written it half drunk on rot-gut whiskey, convinced nobody would answer anyway. The words had felt safe because they'd felt impossible. Now impossibility sat in a broken wagon 30 yards from his porch. "Bunkhouse is around back," Elias heard himself say. "Hasn't been used in 5 years. Probably needs work." "We've slept in worse," Mara said. "I pay monthly. Food and shelter included. You cook 3 meals, keep the main house clean, handle laundry. Work starts at dawn. I'm not—" He stopped, searching for words that wouldn't sound as desperate as he felt. "I'm not good with conversation. Don't expect much of it." "Wasn't looking for conversation. Just work." Elias nodded toward the bunkhouse. "Get settled. Supper's at 6. Don't be late." He turned and walked back inside before he could change his mind, letting the door close harder than necessary. Through the window, he watched Mara climb back onto the wagon and guide it toward the outbuildings. What the hell had he just done? Cut. The bunkhouse hadn't seen occupants since the summer of 1871, back when Elias still believed running a ranch required hired hands instead of isolation. He'd let 3 men go that fall after discovering they'd been stealing cattle and selling them to a buyer in Cheyenne. The betrayal hadn't surprised him. That's what people did. They took and lied and disappeared when consequences arrived. He'd run the ranch alone since then. Now footsteps echoed across his yard, voices called out to each other, and the air itself felt different, occupied. Elias tried to ignore it. He fed cattle, checked fence lines, and deliberately avoided looking toward the bunkhouse. But at 5:30, he found himself heating beans and frying salt pork, portions larger than usual. Exactly 6 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door. "It's open," Elias called. Mara entered first, removing her hat. The children followed single file, each pausing to scrape boots on the porch. Someone had taught them manners, probably the same someone who stood there now, taking in Elias's house with a quick evaluating glance that missed nothing. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space. Sparse didn't begin to describe it. A table, 4 chairs, 1 bookshelf holding maybe a dozen volumes, and a fireplace that Elias only lit when temperature dropped below freezing inside. Mara looked at the stove where Elias had set out supper. "You already cooked," she said. "Didn't know if you'd be ready, first night and all." "We're ready." She turned to her children. "Caleb, help Mr. Mercer set the table. Josie, find plates. Finn, sit down and don't touch anything." They moved with practiced efficiency. Elias stood there feeling useless in his own house while these strangers organized his table. Supper passed in near silence. The beans had burned slightly. The pork was oversalted. Nobody complained. The children ate like they'd learned not to waste food or comment on quality. Halfway through the meal, Finn spoke up. "Marshall likes it here." Elias glanced at the wooden horse the boy had set beside his plate. Crude carving, probably done with a dull knife, but recognizable. "Marshall?" "He's the sheriff," Finn explained with 5-year-old seriousness. "He keeps bad men away." "Finn," Caleb warned, but the boy ignored him. "Does your ranch have bad men?" "Finn, enough," Mara said quietly. Elias found himself almost smiling. Almost. "No bad men here, just cattle and work?" "What about good men?" Josie asked. She had her mother's direct gaze. The question hung in the air. Elias set down his fork. "Haven't met many of those either," he said finally. "Then what are you?" Josie pressed. "Josie," Mara's voice carried warning now. But Elias shook his head. "It's all right." He looked at the girl. "I'm the kind of man who keeps to himself, who doesn't bother people and prefers they don't bother him." "Fair enough answer?" Josie considered this. "I guess." After supper, Mara insisted on cleaning while Elias retreated to the porch. The night had cleared, stars emerging sharp and cold above the ridge. He could hear water running inside, dishes clinking, Mara's low voice directing the children. Domestic sounds. He'd forgotten what they sounded like. "Mr. Mercer?" Elias turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, shoulders squared like he was bracing for a fight. "It's just Mercer," Elias said. "Or Elias, if you prefer. Not much for formality out here." "Mercer, then." The boy didn't move closer. "My mother's been through a lot. We all have. She doesn't need more trouble. If you're planning to try anything, or if you think—" "Stop!" Elias cut him off. "Your mother works for me. That's all. You've got my word on that for whatever a stranger's word is worth to you." Caleb studied him with eyes older than 12 had any right to be. "Words don't mean much. My father made a lot of promises. They died with him in that mine." "I'm not your father." "No, you're not." Caleb turned to go back inside, then paused. "But you're letting us stay. That's something, I guess." The door closed. Elias stood there long after, watching stars wheel overhead, wondering what exactly he'd invited onto his land. Morning came at 4:30, same as always. Elias dressed in the dark, pulled on boots worn soft with age, and headed outside to start chores. Cattle needed feeding regardless of visitors or changed circumstances. He was halfway to the barn when he smelled it. Coffee. Real coffee. Not the burnt tar he usually made from beans older than some of the territory's settlements. Light glowed in the main house windows. Elias approached cautiously and found Mara already in his kitchen, stove fired up, pan sizzling with something that actually smelled edible. She'd tied her hair back and wore an apron that must have come from her own supplies. Elias certainly didn't own one. "Thought I'd start earning my keep," she said without turning around. "Coffee's ready? Breakfast in 10 minutes. It's not even 5 o'clock. Ranch work starts early, so do I." She flipped whatever was in the pan. "Go feed your cattle. Food will be waiting when you're done." Elias almost argued, but the coffee smell made resistance pointless. He poured a cup, took one sip, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Comfort. The cattle work took 90 minutes. When he returned, the table held plates of eggs, actual fried potatoes, and biscuits that looked professionally made. The children sat waiting, clearly under orders not to start until Elias arrived. He took his seat. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. That's the job." Mara sat down. "Eat before it gets cold." The biscuits tasted like memory, like meals from before, when life had included things beyond survival. Elias ate slowly, trying not to let his reaction show. Finn watched him. "Are they good?" "They're good," Elias admitted. "Mama makes the best biscuits in Wyoming," Finn declared. "Maybe even Colorado," Josie added. Caleb said nothing, but he was eating, and that seemed like approval enough. After breakfast, Mara laid out her terms. "I'll need a full accounting of supplies. Whatever you have for cooking, cleaning, everything. I brought some provisions, but not enough to last." "Make a list," Elias said. "I'll ride to Black Hollow tomorrow. Pick up what you need." "I should come with you. I know You're needed here." Elias stood, collecting his hat. "List is fine. I know the merchants." It wasn't entirely true. He knew the merchants but avoided them when possible, preferring to keep trips to town brief and infrequent. But taking Mara meant questions he didn't want to answer, looks he didn't want to see. People in Black Hollow already thought him strange. Showing up with a woman and children would launch rumors faster than telegraph signals. He spent the rest of the day working fence on the south pasture, physical labor that required hands and back but left his mind free to wander. Which it did, circling back repeatedly to the reality settling over his ranch like unexpected snow. 4 people now shared his land. 4 people who talked and moved and needed things. The fence work lasted until dusk. When Elias returned to the house, he found it transformed in small ways. Swept floors, curtains open, table already set for supper. The air smelled of cooking meat and bread. Mara looked up from the stove. "Good timing. 5 minutes." Elias washed up at the basin, watching through the window as Josie helped Finn with something in the yard. Caleb was nowhere visible, probably exploring the property. "Your son doesn't trust me," Elias said. "Can you blame him?" Mara didn't look away from the pot she was stirring. Last man who made his mother promises left her alone with 3 children and debts she didn't know existed. "Your husband." "My late husband. Daniel Quinn. Good man, terrible judgment. Believed people when they told him things would work out. Put his name on loans for a friend's mining operation. Then the mine collapsed, and Daniel with it." She said it flat, emotions locked down tight. Elias recognized the technique. He used it himself. "The friend survive?" he asked. "Oh, he survived just fine. Declared bankruptcy, walked away clean, left me holding paper that said I owed money to men who don't forget debts." Mara set the spoon down. "Spent the last 8 months moving from place to place, working where I could, trying to stay ahead of it." "The debts follow you here?" "Depends on who you ask. According to the law, debts don't transfer to widows unless they co-signed. But law is different in practice than theory. Some men don't care about legal details." Elias felt cold settle in his gut. "What men?" "Doesn't matter. We're here now, safe distance from where we came from." She turned to face him directly. "I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for rescue. I'm not looking for a husband or a father for my children. I need work, shelter, and time to figure out what comes next. That's all." "That's all I'm offering," Elias said. "Good. Then we understand each other." Supper that night involved less silence than the first meal. Josie talked about a bird she'd seen, describing it in detail until Elias identified it as a prairie falcon. Finn made his wooden horse gallop across the table until Mara stopped him with a look. Caleb remained quiet, but watchful. After the children went to bed, Mara stayed behind to clean. Elias found himself helping despite having no memory of deciding to do so. They worked in silence, an efficient rhythm developing. She washed, he dried, plates stacked between them. "This bunkhouse," Mara said eventually. "It needs repair." "What kind?" "Roof leaks in 2 places. Door doesn't latch properly. One window's cracked." She handed him a dripping plate. "Nothing urgent, but it should be fixed before spring storms hit. I'll handle it." "I can help." Elias nearly dropped the plate. "You cook, clean, manage 3 children. That's enough." "I'm not delicate. I can swing a hammer, patch a roof, handle basic carpentry. Daniel taught me before—" She stopped. Before. The word hung there, before the mine, before the debts, before her life turned into this endless moving and uncertainty. "All right," Elias said. "We'll fix it together, tomorrow after chores." Something flickered across Mara's face. Surprise, maybe. Or relief. She nodded and returned to the dishes. That night, lying in bed listening to the house settle, Elias tried to convince himself this arrangement would stay simple. Temporary help, nothing more. The Quinns would work through spring and summer, save money, then move on to wherever people like them moved. His ranch would return to silence. Everything would go back to normal. But even as he thought it, Elias knew he was lying to himself. The week that followed established patterns. Mara rose before dawn, started coffee, prepared breakfast that actually deserved the name. The children adapted to ranch rhythms. Caleb began following Elias during morning chores, asking questions about cattle, learning despite his obvious reluctance to trust. Josie collected eggs from the chickens Elias had almost forgotten he owned, turning it into some kind of daily adventure. Finn attached himself to Elias like a shadow, wooden Marshall always in hand. The silence Elias had protected for years crumbled piece by piece. First morning, Finn asked why the sky was blue. Second morning, Josie wanted to know if horses dreamed. Third morning, Caleb questioned why Elias ran Herefords instead of Longhorns. By the fourth morning, Elias found himself actually answering instead of deflecting. "Herefords handle cold better," he explained to Caleb while they checked the south herd. "Longhorns are tougher, sure, but out here winter kills more cattle than drought or disease. Need animals that can survive when temperature drops below 0 for weeks." Caleb absorbed this, filing it away in whatever mental ledger he kept. "You run the ranch alone before we came?" 12 years. "That's a long time without help." "That's a long time without complications," Elias corrected. The boy looked at him. "Are we complications?" Elias considered lying, but something about Caleb's directness deserved honesty. "Yes, but not the kind I expected." "What kind did you expect?" "The kind that steals or breaks things. The kind that leaves messes behind." He checked a fence post, testing its stability. "Your family's different. You clean up after yourselves. Mama says we have to earn our place anywhere we go. Can't give people reasons to kick us out." Caleb paused. "You thinking about kicking us out?" "No." The answer came faster than Elias intended. He saw Caleb notice the speed, saw something shift in the boy's expression. Not quite trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. They finished the fence check in silence. That afternoon, Elias and Mara tackled the bunkhouse repairs. She hadn't exaggerated her skills. Within an hour, she'd patched the roof leak with efficiency that suggested she'd done it before, multiple times. "Daniel wasn't handy," she said, hammering down tar paper. "Brilliant with numbers and ideas, useless with tools. I learned young that if something needed fixing, I either did it myself or lived with it broken." "Most women wouldn't have bothered learning," Elias said. "Most women had fathers or brothers or husbands who handled it. I had a father who died early, and a husband who loved me but couldn't hammer a nail straight." She set down the hammer, wiping sweat despite February cold. "You learn, or you suffer. Simple as that." They moved to the door next, Elias replacing the broken latch, while Mara held it steady. Working alongside someone felt strange. He'd spent years developing solitary methods for every task. Having a second pair of hands required adjustment. "You never married again?" Mara asked. "After whoever left?" Elias's hand stilled. "What makes you think someone left?" "Men don't choose this kind of isolation for no reason. Either someone left or someone died. You don't have the look of a widower." She studied his face. "Am I wrong?" "No," Elias admitted. "Sarah, 15 years ago. Found a circuit preacher passing through and convinced him to run off with her. Left a note explaining how ranch life wasn't what she'd imagined. She just left? She was 23, I was 30. We'd been married 2 years. Looking back, I understood it. This land's hard, lonely. She wanted parties and neighbors and a life that didn't involve frozen water buckets and cattle. He finished fitting the latch. Can't blame someone for wanting more than this. But you stayed. Didn't have anywhere better to go. Mara tested the door, swinging it open and closed. The latch held. There, good as new. Better, Elias said. It's actually functional now. She smiled, first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, erasing years of hardship for a moment. Then it faded, and she was back to business. Window next? They worked until dusk, fixing the cracked pane with glass Elias found in the barn. By the time they finished, the bunkhouse looked lived in rather than abandoned. Curtains hung in windows. The stove worked properly. Beds had clean blankets. Thank you, Mara said. This means a lot. To all of us. Elias nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude. Just maintenance. Needed doing anyway. Still, thank you. That night at supper, Finn announced Marshall had decided to stay on the ranch permanently. He likes the barn, the boy explained. Says it's a good place for a sheriff. Does he now? Elias said, fighting the urge to smile. Marshall talks to you? Josie asked her brother. All the time. He says Mr. Mercer's ranch is the safest place we've been. Caleb shot his mother a look. Mara's expression remained neutral, but Elias caught the tightness around her eyes. After the children went to bed, she lingered in the kitchen. Finn gets attached easily, she said quietly. Too easily. I need you to know that when we eventually leave, it's going to be hard on him. When you leave, Elias repeated. Eventually. Once I've saved enough, once we have a plan. This isn't permanent. I know. Do you? Because Finn's already talking like we're staying forever. Josie's starting to relax. Even Caleb's warming up. I can't let them get too comfortable. This isn't our home. What is then? Elias asked. Your home? Mara looked at him. Honestly, I don't know anymore. It's been so long since we had one. She left before he could respond. Elias sat alone in the kitchen, coffee growing cold in his cup, thinking about homes and permanence and the way children's laughter had started echoing through rooms that had been silent for over a decade. Temporary, he reminded himself. They're temporary. But the reminder felt weaker every day. Sunday arrived clear and cold. Elias spent the morning splitting firewood, physical work that let him avoid thinking too hard about anything. He was stacking the split logs when hoofbeats approached from the east. 3 riders crested the ridge. Elias recognized them immediately. Ben Hollister, Jack Moreland, and Frank Chen, neighboring ranchers who ran smaller operations scattered throughout Black Hollow territory. He'd traded with them occasionally, maintained civil but distant relationships. He hadn't invited them here. Mercer, Ben called out, reining up at respectful distance. Got a minute? Elias set down the axe. Depends what you need. Heard you took on a cook, woman and some kids. Ben's tone stayed neutral, but his eyes searched the property. Thought we'd check in, make sure everything's square. Square how? Jack leaned forward in his saddle. Come on, Mercer, you know how this looks. Lone rancher, widow woman, children, people talk. Let them. It's not that simple, Frank said. He was younger than the other two, less comfortable with confrontation. Some of the talk's coming from Gideon Pike. He's been asking questions. Elias felt ice form in his chest. What kind of questions? About the woman, where she came from, whether you knew her before she showed up. Ben shifted his weight. Pike seems real interested in your new cook. Why? Didn't say. But when Gideon Pike takes interest in something, usually means he thinks he's owed a piece of it. The bunkhouse door opened. Mara emerged, drying her hands on her apron. She took in the 3 riders with one quick glance, then looked at Elias. Everything all right? She asked. Fine, Elias said. Just neighbors. Mrs. Quinn, is it? Ben tipped his hat. Ben Hollister. That's Jack Moreland and Frank Chen. We run properties near here. Mara nodded acknowledgement, but didn't approach. Gentlemen? Meaning no disrespect, ma'am, but have you had dealings with Gideon Pike? Ben's question came out blunt. Elias saw Mara's shoulders stiffen. What makes you ask? He's been mentioning your name. Told Tom Brennan at the Trading Post that you and him had unfinished business from Colorado. That true? The silence stretched. Elias watched Mara's face go carefully blank, the same expression she wore when discussing her late husband. I knew Mr. Pike years ago, she said finally. My husband had business with him. Nothing that concerns anyone now. Might want to reconsider that, Jack said. Pike's got reach. Money, connections, ways of making things difficult for people. If he thinks you owe him something, I don't owe him anything. Mara's voice went sharp as cut glass. My husband's debts died with my husband. Pike has no legal claim on me or my children. Legal and practical are different things out here, Ben said gently. Just thought you should know he's asking questions. Might want to keep your head down. Stay quiet for a while. I appreciate the warning. Mara turned and walked back inside, door closing firmly behind her. The three riders looked at Elias. You know what you're doing? Ben asked. Running my ranch, employing a cook. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. It's not. But crossing Pike is stupid, and harboring someone he has interest in might qualify. Ben gathered his reins. Watch yourself, Mercer. Whatever history that woman's running from, it might catch up faster than you think. They rode off, leaving Elias standing in his yard with anxiety spreading like winter frost. He found Mara in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. You want to tell me about Pike? He asked. No. He's going to be a problem. I know. Marasha. She set down the knife, hands bracing against the counter. Daniel borrowed money from Pike's operation 5 years ago. $1,500 to invest in a silver mine near Leadville. The mine was supposed to be a sure thing. It collapsed 8 months later, killing 23 men, including my husband. And Pike wanted his money back. Pike wanted triple. Said that was the agreement. $1,500 borrowed, $4,500 owed. Daniel never told me about those terms. Never told me he'd signed anything. She picked up the knife again, resumed chopping. After Daniel died, Pike showed up with papers claiming I inherited the debt. Gave me 2 choices, work it off in one of his saloons or marry someone who'd assume responsibility. Elias felt his hands curl into fists. You did neither. I ran. Took the children, sold everything we owned, and disappeared. Been moving ever since, staying ahead of wherever Pike's reach extended. She looked at him. That's what you bought when you hired me. Someone's unfinished business. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have hired me if I had? Honest answer, probably not. Elias liked complications even less than he liked company. But standing here now, watching Mara try to hold herself together through sheer force of will, he couldn't imagine sending her away. Pike has no legal claim, he said. You said so yourself. I said that. Doesn't mean he'll accept it. Mara set down the knife again, looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with physical work. I shouldn't have come here. Shouldn't have stayed. If Pike finds me, he'll make trouble for you too. Let him try. You don't know him. Gideon Pike doesn't forgive debts or accept refusal. I said let him try. Elias stepped closer. You work for me now. That means you're under my protection, such as it is. Pike wants to collect on some imaginary debt. He can discuss it with me first. You'd do that? Risk your ranch for people you barely know? Elias considered the question. 3 weeks ago, the answer would have been an automatic no. But 3 weeks ago, his house had been empty, his mornings silent, his life a carefully maintained void. You're not just people I barely know, he said. You're my cook. Your children live on my property. That makes you mine to protect. Something shifted in Mara's expression. I don't belong to anyone. Not Pike, not you, not any man. Poor choice of words. What I meant... Elias stopped, searching for better phrasing. What I meant is you're part of this ranch now, and I protect what's mine, the land, the cattle, the people. All of it. Mara studied him for a long moment. You really mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. She nodded slowly. All right then, we stay, for now. But if Pike comes, when he comes, this gets complicated fast. I've handled complicated before. Not like this. Pike plays dirty. He'll target your business, your reputation, anything he can reach, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants. Then I guess we'll find out how stubborn a Wyoming rancher can be. For the first time since the conversation started, Mara almost smiled. Fair warning, I'm pretty stubborn myself. Notice that. They returned to preparing supper, but the easy rhythm from before had shifted into something else. Partnership, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. That night, after the children slept, Elias stood on his porch, watching stars emerge. Somewhere out there, Gideon Pike was asking questions, making plans, preparing to collect on debts, real or imagined. Let him come. Elias had spent 12 years avoiding conflict, but avoidance stopped working when someone threatened what you'd decided to keep. And somewhere between biscuits and repairs and children's questions, he'd made a decision. The Quinns weren't leaving, not if he had anything to say about it. Pike arrived on a Thursday. Elias was mending fence near the north pasture when he spotted the dust cloud moving up the ridge. 5 riders, moving with the kind of deliberate pace that announced importance rather than urgency. He recognized the formation. 1 man flanked by 4 others. Power moving with an escort. He set down his tools and waited. The riders approached within 50 yards before stopping. The man in the center sat astride a black gelding that probably cost more than most ranchers made in a year. Gideon Pike looked exactly like what he was. Wealth dressed in expensive leather, authority worn like a second skin. "Elias Mercer," Pike called out. His voice carried the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. "Mind if we talk?" "Seems like you're already here," Elias said. "Talk about what?" Pike dismounted with practiced ease, leaving his men on their horses. He walked forward alone, stopping at conversational distance. Up close, he looked to be in his early 50s, well-fed and well-dressed, with eyes that calculated value the way a butcher assessed meat. "I'll be direct," Pike said. "You're employing a woman named Mara Quinn. I have business with her. She works for me. Any business goes through me first. That's not how this works. Mrs. Quinn owes a substantial debt to my organization. I'm here to collect." "Funny," Elias said. "She mentioned you might show up, also mentioned the debt died with her husband." Pike's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Is that what she told you?" "Let me guess. Poor widow, victimized by circumstances, just trying to provide for her children?" Something like that. "And you believed her?" Pike shook his head. "Daniel Quinn borrowed $1,500 from me in 1871. The terms were clear: triple return within 5 years or collateral seizure. Those terms were in writing, signed by both Quinn and his wife." "Mara says she never signed anything." "Mara wasn't paying attention when her husband put a pen in her hand." Pike reached into his coat, produced a folded document. "This is a copy. The original's filed with a lawyer in Denver. Her signature's right there beside her husband's." Elias took the paper, unfolding it carefully. The document looked official. Typed text, official seals, 2 signatures at the bottom. The handwriting meant nothing to him, but the numbers were clear enough. 1,500 borrowed, 4,500 owed. "Even if this is legitimate," Elias said, handing it back, "Quinn's been dead over a year. Debt should have been settled with his estate." "What estate?" "Man died with nothing but hole-riddled clothes and outstanding obligations. The wife ran before settlement could occur." Pike folded the document away. "I've been tracking her for 8 months. Finding her here was unexpected but convenient." "Convenient how?" "Because now I don't have to chase her any further." Pike looked past Elias toward the ranch buildings. "Simple arrangement. She works off the debt. I have business interests throughout the territory. Saloons, hotels, trading posts, all need reliable labor. 3 years should cover what's owed. 3 years in one of your saloons. Or hotels. I'm flexible about placement." Elias felt anger build slow and cold in his chest. "That's not happening. You're making this personal when it's just business, Mercer. The woman owes money. I'm offering reasonable terms for repayment." "Reasonable would be accepting her husband's debt and moving on." Pike's expression hardened. "I don't abandon debts. That's a bad precedent. Other people start thinking they can borrow and run. Can't have that." "Then take me to court. File a legal claim. Let a judge decide if your paper means anything. Courts are expensive and slow. This is faster." Pike glanced back at his men. "I'm trying to be civil about this. Don't force me to be otherwise." "That a threat?" "It's a fact. I have resources, connections, and patience. You're one rancher barely making ends meet on isolated property. You really want to make an enemy of me over some woman you've known for what? A month?" 3 weeks, Elias said. but I'm a fast learner when it comes to recognizing bastards who prey on widows and children. Pike's jaw tightened. Careful. No, you be careful. Mara Quinn works for me under fair terms. She's not going anywhere unless she chooses to. If you've got legal claim, prove it in court. Otherwise, get off my land. Silence stretched between them. Behind Pike, the four riders shifted in their saddles, hands drifting toward weapons they probably hoped they wouldn't need. Pike studied Elias with new calculation. You're serious? As Winter. Interesting. Most men show more sense when faced with losing everything. Pike stepped back, moving toward his horse. I'll give you 3 days to reconsider. After that, things get complicated for you. Supply lines dry up. Merchants suddenly can't extend credit. Cattle prices drop when it's time to sell. You understand how this works? I understand you're leaving my property now. Pike mounted smoothly. 3 days, Mercer. Use them wisely. The riders turned and headed back down the ridge, dust rising behind them. Elias watched until they disappeared, then walked quickly toward the house. He found Mara in the kitchen kneading bread dough with mechanical intensity. She didn't look up when he entered. He came, she said. Not a question. He came. What did he say? Elias repeated the conversation, including details about the document. Mara's hands never stopped working the dough, but he saw her knuckles go white. I never signed that paper, she said quietly. Daniel might have forged my name. Wouldn't be the first time. He did it once before on a land deed. Thought he was protecting me from legal complications. Almost lost everything when the truth came out. Even if it's forged, proving that requires lawyers and money, which I don't have. Mara finally stopped kneading, staring down at her flour-covered hands. I should leave. Tonight. Take the children and disappear again before Pike makes trouble for you. No. Elias, I said no. We're past that option now. He pulled out a chair, sitting down heavily. Pike threatened to cut my supply lines, ruin my credit, manipulate cattle prices. He's going to move against me regardless of whether you stay or go. Running just means he wins without a fight. So you fight and lose everything anyway. How is that better? Maybe I don't lose. Mara looked at him like he'd suggested flying to the moon. You're one rancher. He's Gideon Pike. He has money, influence, and connections throughout 3 territories. What exactly do you think you can do against that? I don't know yet, Elias admitted, but I know running doesn't fix anything. You've been running for 8 months. Has it worked? The question hung there. Mara turned away, moving to the window. Outside, Josie and Finn played some game involving Marshall and imaginary outlaws. Caleb sat on the porch whittling a piece of wood with careful concentration. They're starting to feel safe here, Mara said softly. First time since Daniel died that they've relaxed. Josie's laughing again. Finn's sleeping through the night without nightmares. Even Caleb's stopped watching every door like someone's about to kick it down. Then don't take that away from them. What if staying means watching you lose your ranch? What if Pike destroys everything you've built because of me? Elias stood, moving to stand beside her at the window. I built this ranch on isolation and silence. Spent 12 years convincing myself that was enough. Then you showed up with your children and your bread and your stubbornness, and suddenly isolated and silent felt empty instead of safe. He paused. I'm not losing this ranch, but even if I did, I'd rather lose it fighting for something worth keeping than keep it by surrendering. Mara turned to face him. You barely know us. I know enough. You're being foolish. Probably. But I've been sensible for 12 years and it got me nothing but cold coffee and quiet. Maybe foolish will work better. She almost smiled at that. Almost. Pike gave you 3 days? That's what he said. Then we have 3 days to figure out something better than blind stubbornness. Mara returned to her bread dough. I need to think, and you need to talk to your neighbors. Why? Because if Pike's going to move against you, he'll do it through economic pressure, supply chains, credit, market prices, all things that depend on community cooperation. You'll need allies. I don't have allies. I have neighbors I barely talk to. Then start talking. Ben Hollister and the others came to warn you about Pike. That means they're not completely under his control. Find out who else might resist, who else Pike squeezed over the years. Build a coalition. Elias stared at her. You've thought about this. I've had 8 months running from Pike to think about it. Fighting never seemed possible alone. But maybe it's possible with help. She shaped the dough into loaves with practiced efficiency. I ran because I was one woman with 3 children and no resources. You're an established rancher with property and standing. Different situation. You really think we can beat him? I think running hasn't worked and fighting might. That's the best answer I've got. The kitchen door burst open. Finn ran inside, Marshall held high. There's a bad man coming, he announced. Marshall says so. Mara and Elias exchanged glances. What bad man, sweetheart? Mara asked. The one with the scary horse. Marshall saw him from the barn. Finn looked at Elias. Are you going to fight him? Finn, there's no... Mara started. Yes, Elias interrupted. If I have to. Good. Finn nodded seriously. Marshall says you're brave, and brave men protect families. After Finn ran back outside, Mara turned to Elias. You just promised my 5-year-old son you'd fight Gideon Pike. Seems that way. You understand this could end badly. I understand staying silent and hoping problems disappear definitely ends badly. Elias headed for the door. I'm riding to Hollister's place, then Moreland's and Chen's. You're right, if we're doing this, we need help. He made it halfway to the barn before Mara's voice stopped him. Elias? He turned. She stood in the doorway, framed by kitchen light, looking uncertain for the first time since arriving. Thank you for not sending us away. Thank me when this is over, he said. Assuming we survive it. The ride to Ben Hollister's ranch took 90 minutes across rough terrain. Elias used the time rehearsing what to say, trying to figure out how to convince men to risk their livelihoods against someone with Pike's resources. He was still rehearsing when he arrived and found Ben working cattle in the South Pen. Mercer, Ben called out, surprised. Wasn't expecting company. Need to talk, it's important. They sat on Ben's porch drinking coffee that tasted like it had been made yesterday and reheated today. Elias explained Pike's visit, the debt claim, the threats against supply lines and credit. Ben listened without interrupting. When Elias finished, he set down his cup and sighed. Pike's been squeezing small ranchers for years, Ben said finally. Not directly. He's too smart for that. But suddenly credit dries up, or shipping costs increase, or buyers offer lower prices for your cattle than they offered last season. Always just coincidence, always just business. He looked at Elias. You planning to fight this? Planning to try. That's suicide. Pike has money and connections throughout Wyoming and Colorado. He owns the cattle buyers, the shipping companies, half the merchants in Black Hollow. What do you have? Stubbornness, Elias said, and hopefully a few neighbors tired of bowing to Pike every time he makes demands. A few neighbors won't be enough. Then I need more than a few. Elias leaned forward. Ben, how many ranchers has Pike hurt over the years? How many people have lost property or business because he decided to squeeze them? I can't be the first to resist. You're not, but you might be the dumbest. Ben stood, pacing his porch. Jack Moreland lost his best grazing land 3 years ago. Pike bought it through a shell company after suddenly nobody would extend Jack credit for winter feed. Frank Chen nearly lost everything when shipping costs mysteriously doubled during a drought. Even I've felt pressure. Last season, my cattle sold for 30% below market value, and the buyer admitted off record that Pike set the price, so others have reason to stand against him. Having reason and having ability are different things. Pike breaks people financially, not physically. Hard to fight someone who ruins you through business deals and legal manipulation. Unless everyone refuses to participate, Elias said. What if the ranchers coordinated, set their own prices, arranged independent shipping, extended credit to each other instead of relying on merchants' Pike controls? Ben stopped pacing. You're talking about organizing the entire ranching community. I'm talking about surviving. Individually, we're vulnerable. Together, maybe we have leverage. That's a big maybe. And it requires trust. These men have been competitors for years. You think they'll suddenly cooperate? I think they'll do what makes sense when faced with a common enemy. Elias stood. Will you help me ask them? Ben studied him for a long moment. What changed? Last I knew you avoided people like they carried plague. Now you're proposing community organizing? Things changed. The Quinn woman and her kids changed things. Yes. You care about them. It wasn't a question, but Elias answered anyway. More than I expected to. Ben nodded slowly. All right, I'll help you talk to the others. but don't expect miracles. Most men will be too scared to stand against Pike openly. I just need enough who aren't. They spent the next 2 days riding to neighboring ranches. Jack Moreland listened to their proposal and agreed immediately, anger over his lost grazing land still sharp. Frank Chen took longer to convince, but finally nodded, saying his wife was tired of living in fear of financial ruin. Others proved harder. Sam Fletcher refused outright, saying he had children to think about. The Hartman brothers listened politely and declined, not willing to risk their operation. Old Tom Brennan, who ran the trading post, shook his head and said, "Fighting Pike was like fighting weather, pointless and exhausting." By Friday afternoon, Elias had commitments from 7 ranchers out of 23 they'd approached. Not nearly enough. He returned home exhausted and frustrated to find Mara waiting on the porch. "How many?" she asked. 7 definite. 3 more considering. The rest too scared or smart to get involved. 7's a start. 7's not enough to stand against Pike. Mara gestured toward the kitchen. "Come inside, I have an idea." The table held papers covered in Mara's neat handwriting. Lists, numbers, calculations. She'd been busy while he'd been recruiting. "I've been thinking about Pike's leverage," she said, pointing to one of the lists. "He controls supply chains, credit, and buyers. But that control depends on everyone using his network. What if we built a different network?" Ben suggested that. Problem is organization and capital. Takes money to establish independent suppliers and buyers. Money or barter? Mara tapped another page. Most ranchers need the same things: feed, tools, basic supplies. What if they traded directly with each other instead of going through merchants' Pike controls? Cattle for grain, grain for equipment, equipment for labor. Create a parallel economy. Elias scanned her notes. She'd outlined a complex barter system that bypassed traditional currency. It was ambitious, probably naive, and just crazy enough to possibly work. "Where'd you learn economics?" he asked. "Daniel talked business constantly. I listened more than he realized." She pulled over another page. "This is the hard part. We need someone Pike can't pressure to act as coordinator. Someone who tracks what everyone needs and facilitates trades. Someone independent of Pike's influence." "Exactly. I've been thinking about who that could be." Before she could continue, Caleb burst through the door. "Riders coming," he said, breathing hard. "Lots of them." Elias moved to the window. Sure enough, dust rose from the ridge road, multiple horses moving fast. He counted at least 8, maybe 10. "Take your siblings to the bunkhouse," Mara told Caleb. "Stay there until I come get you." "But now, Caleb—" The boy hesitated, then obeyed. Mara turned to Elias. "Is it Pike?" she asked. "Don't know yet." He grabbed his rifle from above the door. "Stay inside." Not a chance. They stepped onto the porch together as the riders arrived. But it wasn't Pike's men. It was Ben Hollister leading a group that included Jack Moreland, Frank Chen, and several others Elias recognized from their recruitment efforts. "Heard you needed more people," Ben called out, reining up. "Figured we'd make the decision easier." "What changed?" Elias asked. Jack spoke up. "Pike visited my place this afternoon, said he heard I'd been talking to you about organizing against him. Suggested I reconsider before I lost more than grazing land." "He came to my ranch too," another rancher added. "Made it clear that cooperation with you would be bad for business." Frank nodded. "Same here. So we figured if Pike's already threatening us for talking, might as well actually do something worth threatening over." Elias felt something loosen in his chest. "How many total?" Ben grinned. 14 confirmed. More considering once they hear Pike's already making moves. Threatening people tends to backfire when the threats come before any action. "Pike jumped too early," Mara said quietly beside Elias. "He assumed intimidation would work before we'd organized. Now he's just given you recruitment evidence." "We need to move fast," Ben said. "Pike's going to escalate once he realizes threats didn't work." "What's the plan?" Elias looked at Mara. She stepped forward, suddenly addressing 10 ranchers with the same confidence she used managing her children. "The plan is building something Pike can't control," she said. "An independent network for trade, supplies, and mutual support. It'll require trust and cooperation, but it's possible if everyone commits." She laid out the barter system she'd designed, explaining how trades could flow without involving Pike-controlled merchants or buyers. The ranchers listened, asking questions, raising concerns, but gradually nodding as the vision became clearer. Who coordinates all this? Frank asked. Managing that many trades and keeping track of who owes what, that's a full-time job. I'll do it, Mara said. I have experience with bookkeeping and numbers, and Pike has no economic leverage over me since I don't own property or business. Pike has other kinds of leverage over you, Jack pointed out. That debt he claims. Let him claim it. We're past carrying what Gideon Pike thinks he's owed. The meeting ran until midnight. By the time the ranchers left, they'd established basic framework, a barter exchange centered at Mercer Ranch, coordinated by Mara, with commitments from 14 operations and more expected to join. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Elias walked Mara back to the bunkhouse after everyone departed. Stars filled the Wyoming sky, cold and brilliant. You just made yourself central to this entire operation, Elias said. If Pike was interested before, he's going to be furious now. Good, Mara said. Fury makes people sloppy, and sloppy creates opportunities. You sound like you've done this before. I haven't, but I've watched powerful men for years. They all share one weakness. They assume everyone else will back down eventually. She stopped at the bunkhouse door. Pike thinks threats work because they've worked before. Time to teach him different. He's not going to take this well. I'm counting on it. Angry people make mistakes. She opened the door, then paused. Elias? This thing we're building, it's bigger than just fighting Pike now. If it works, it changes how ranchers operate throughout the territory. I know. Are you ready for that? For your isolated ranch to become the center of community organization? Elias looked back toward the main house, thinking about 3 weeks ago when silence had been his only companion. No. But I wasn't ready for you and your children either, and that turned out all right. Mara smiled, genuine warmth that reached her eyes this time. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start building something Pike can't tear down. She went inside, leaving Elias alone with the stars and the strange sensation of hope he hadn't felt in over a decade. Pike's response came faster than expected. Sunday morning, Tom Brennan arrived at the ranch looking uncomfortable. Got a message from Pike, Tom said, refusing Elias's offer of coffee. He's calling in markers. Every merchant in Black Hollow's been told. Anyone who supplies your ranch or the ranchers working with you gets cut off from Pike's distribution network. Can he do that? Mara asked. He can try. Question is whether merchants will comply. Tom shifted his weight. Most of them depend on Pike for wholesale goods. Going against him means losing access to supplies they need to run their businesses. So they'll comply, Elias said. Most will, but not all. Tom pulled a folded paper from his pocket. This is a list of merchants who told Pike to go to hell. Wasn't many, 5 out of 23. But it's something. Mara took the list, scanning it quickly. 5 merchants willing to resist. That's enough to start. Start what? Tom asked. Alternative supply chain. If Pike controls wholesale distribution, we go around it. Direct orders from manufacturers, cooperative buying, whatever works. She looked at Tom. Are you with us or against us? I'm too old to fight anyone, but I'm also too stubborn to let Pike dictate who I do business with. Tom headed for the door. I'll keep you informed what I hear, but be careful. Pike's not done. This was just the opening move. Over the next week, Pike's pressure intensified in exactly the ways Elias had expected. Credit lines dried up. Shipping companies suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Cattle buyers who'd worked with the ranchers for years claimed market downturns made purchasing impossible. But Mara's barter system held. Ranchers traded among themselves, bypassing traditional commerce. What they couldn't trade, they cobbled together through the 5 resistant merchants and creative problem-solving. It wasn't smooth. Arguments erupted over trade values. Some ranchers tried to take advantage of others. The coordination required constant effort from Mara, who spent 14-hour days managing the exchange while still cooking and caring for her children. Elias watched her work with something approaching awe. She'd transformed his kitchen table into command center, papers and ledgers spreading across every surface. She negotiated disputes with patience he didn't possess, found solutions to problems he wouldn't have imagined, and somehow kept everything moving forward. You're good at this, he told her one evening after the children had gone to bed. I'm desperate, she corrected. There's a difference. No, you're good at it. Natural organizer, good with numbers, better with people. This isn't desperation, it's skill. Mara looked up from her ledgers, exhaustion evident in the lines around her eyes. Skill doesn't matter if Pike breaks us before the system stabilizes. He hasn't yet. He will. He's probing for weaknesses, waiting for the right moment to strike hard. She set down her pen. I keep wondering what we're missing. What angle Pike's going to use that we haven't anticipated? The answer came 3 days later. Elias was working the north fence when Caleb came running across the pasture, moving faster than Elias had ever seen him move. Something's wrong with Mama, the boy gasped out. She collapsed. We can't wake her up. Elias ran. He found Mara on the bunkhouse floor, unconscious, breathing shallow. Josie and Finn huddled nearby, terrified. Elias checked for injuries, found none, and tried gently shaking her. No response. How long has she been like this? He asked Caleb. 5 minutes, maybe. She was working at the table, then suddenly grabbed her stomach and fell. Elias looked at the table. Mara's coffee cup sat there, still steaming. He picked it up, sniffed carefully. Nothing obvious. But coffee didn't make healthy women collapse without reason. Caleb, ride to Ben Hollister's ranch fast as you can. Tell him we need a doctor immediately. Elias lifted Mara carefully, carrying her to the bed. Josie, get water and clean cloth. Finn, stay out of the way. The children moved to obey, Finn clutching Marshall with white knuckles. Elias sat beside Mara, checking her breathing, her pulse. Both steady but weak. Her skin felt clammy, temperature dropping. Poison. The word formed cold and certain in his mind. Someone had poisoned Mara's coffee, which meant Pike had moved beyond economic pressure into something far more dangerous. The doctor arrived 2 hours later, a thin man named Garrett who'd practiced medicine in rougher places than Wyoming Territory. He examined Mara with methodical thoroughness, while Elias paced the bunkhouse like a caged animal. Well? Elias demanded when Garrett finally straightened. Poison, some kind of plant-based toxin, I'd guess. Hemlock or maybe nightshade. Garrett wiped his hands. Hard to say without knowing the source. She's lucky. Dose wasn't fatal. Probably meant to incapacitate rather than kill. Can you help her? Already did what I could. Gave her charcoal to absorb remaining toxin, fluids to flush her system. Now we wait. Garrett packed his bag. She should wake within 6 to 8 hours. Might be sick for a few days after, but she'll recover. Elias felt tension ease slightly. You're certain? As certain as medicine gets. Whoever did this miscalculated the amount or she didn't drink enough. Either way, she'll live. Garrett paused at the door. This wasn't an accident. I know. You gonna tell me what's happening here? Gideon Pike's happening. He's trying to break resistance to his control over local ranchers. Mara's been coordinating our alternative supply network. This is him sending a message. Garrett's expression darkened. Pike's crossed lines before, but poisoning women? That's new territory even for him. Can you prove it was poison? Elias asked. Something that would hold up legally? I can testify to the symptoms and my professional opinion, but proving who administered it? That's your problem, not mine. Garrett headed for his horse. Watch her closely tonight. If her condition changes, send for me immediately. After Garrett left, Elias returned to Mara's bedside. The children sat nearby, Josie holding Finn, Caleb standing rigid by the window like a sentry. Is Mama going to die? Finn whispered. No, Elias said with more certainty than he felt. Doctor says she'll be fine, just needs rest. This is because of Pike, isn't it? Caleb's voice came out flat and hard. Because we stayed here instead of running. This is because Pike's a bastard who hurts people to get what he wants. Same result either way. Mama's lying there poisoned because of decisions we made. Elias looked at the boy. 12 years old and already carrying guilt no child should bear. Your mama made those decisions knowing the risks. She chose to fight instead of run. That's not your fault or mine, it's Pike's. Then what are we going to do about it? Good question. Elias had been asking himself the same thing since finding Mara unconscious. Pike had escalated from economic pressure to violence. That changed everything. First, we make sure your mother recovers, Elias said. Then we figure out how to hit Pike back harder than he hit us. How? He's got money and men. We've got 14 ranchers and a barter system. We've got something better. We've got proof Pike's willing to poison women to maintain control. That's the kind of thing that turns people against you, even people who've been scared into compliance. Caleb considered this. You think anyone will care? Pike's done worse things, and nobody's stopped him before. Nobody had reason to band together before. Now they do. Elias moved to the window, looking out at the ranch that had become so much more than isolated property. Pike made a mistake. He thought scaring us would work. Instead, he just gave us ammunition. Mara woke near midnight, groggy but conscious. Her first words were about the children. "They're fine," Elias assured her. "Scared but fine. Caleb's watching them in the main house." She tried to sit up, fell back against the pillow. "What happened?" "Someone poisoned your coffee. Doctor says you'll recover, but you need rest." "Pike." "Probably. Can't prove it yet, but who else?" Elias helped her drink water. "The question is what we do about it." Mara closed her eyes, thinking. When she opened them again, steel had replaced the confusion. "We use it. Turn it into a weapon against him." "How?" "Pike's power depends on fear and compliance. People cooperate because they think he's untouchable, that fighting back is futile. But poisoning a widow with 3 children? That's not untouchable. That's desperate." She struggled to sit up again, managing it this time. "We spread word about what he did. Let people see Pike's willing to hurt anyone who opposes him. Watch how many suddenly decide they'd rather resist than bow." That could backfire. Could make people more scared instead of angry. Then we make sure they understand the stakes. Pike didn't just poison me. He declared war on everyone trying to build independence from his control. Next time it could be anyone. Their wives, their children, themselves. Mara's voice strengthened despite her obvious exhaustion. Fear works both ways. Pike's scared of losing control. We make everyone else scared of what happens if they let him keep it. Elias studied her face, pale but determined. Most people would be traumatized after being poisoned. Mara was strategizing. "You should rest," he said. "I should work." How long was I unconscious? But 6 hours, give or take. Then I'm 6 hours behind on coordinating trades. Help me to the table. I need to check the ledgers. Mara, Elias, I'm not dying and I'm not stopping. Pike wants me scared and incapacitated. I refuse to give him either. She swung her legs off the bed, wobbled, caught herself. "Now help me or get out of my way." He helped her. They worked until dawn, Mara reviewing trade agreements and coordinating deliveries while Elias handled anything requiring physical movement. She was weak, hands shaking when she wrote, but her mind stayed sharp. "We're missing something," she said around 3 in the morning. "Pike didn't just poison me randomly. He's planning something bigger. This was meant to disable me at a specific time." "What makes you think that?" "Timing. Why now instead of last week or next week? What's happening soon that Pike wants me unable to manage?" She flipped through her ledgers. "There. Saturday. We're coordinating the largest trade exchange yet. Grain shipments from Hollister, cattle sales from Chen, equipment deliveries to 4 different ranches. Everything converging at once." Elias saw where she was heading. If you're incapacitated, the trades fall apart. Confusion, missed deliveries, ranchers blaming each other for failures. Exactly. Pike undermines the entire network by removing the coordinator at the critical moment. Mara made notes in margins. "Which means we need backup coordination and we need it before Saturday." "Who?" "I don't know yet, but we need someone Pike can't poison or intimidate." She looked at Elias. "Someone he doesn't see as a threat." The answer came from an unexpected source. Next morning, Josie approached Elias while he was feeding cattle. The girl had been quiet since Mara's poisoning, but now she looked determined. "I want to help," she said. "Help how?" "With Mama's work. The ledgers and trade coordinating. I'm good with numbers and I know how to write clearly." Josie held up a sample page she'd copied from Mara's notes. "See? I can do it." The writing was neat, organized, accurate. Elias blinked in surprise. "How old are you again?" 10, almost 11. Josie lifted her chin. "Mama taught me bookkeeping back in Colorado. Said I had a head for numbers. I've been watching her work the past month, learning the system." "This is dangerous work. Pike's already poisoned your mother." "I know. That's why I want to help. Pike thinks hurting Mama stops everything. But if I can do her work, then hurting her accomplished nothing." Josie's eyes blazed with anger that looked too old for her face. "I want Pike to know he can't stop us, not by scaring us and not by hurting us." Elias looked at this fierce child and saw Mara's steel determination reflected. The girl was 10 years old and volunteering to make herself a target. Your mother would say no, he said. Mama doesn't get a vote. She's sick because of me and Caleb and Finn, because she stayed here to give us a home instead of running like we always do. Josie stepped closer. Let me help, please. Elias knelt to meet her eyes. If you do this, you follow every safety rule I give you. You don't go anywhere alone. You don't accept food or drink from anyone except family. And if anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately. Understood? Josie nodded solemnly. And we tell your mother together, not doing this behind her back. They told Mara that afternoon. She argued for 10 minutes before Josie wore her down with the same stubborn logic she'd inherited from her mother. Finally, Mara sighed. Fine, but Elias is right. You follow every safety precaution, and I'm still managing the difficult trades. Deal, Josie said, already reaching for the ledgers. Watching them work together, mother and daughter bent over the same papers, voices mixing as they discussed trade values and delivery schedules. Elias felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about fighting Pike anymore. It was about protecting something worth protecting. A family learning to trust each other. A community learning to stand together. Pike had miscalculated badly. Word about the poisoning spread faster than wildfire. By Wednesday, every rancher in the network knew what had happened. Some got scared, pulling back from participation, but more got angry. Thursday morning, 8 new ranchers approached Elias asking to join the network. By afternoon, the number had grown to 15. People who'd been sitting on the fence decided that poisoning widows crossed a line worth standing against. The network swelled from 14 operations to 29 in 3 days. Pike had wanted to break them. Instead, he'd unified them. Ben Hollister showed up Thursday evening with news. Pike's furious, Ben reported. My contact at his main office says he's been raging for 2 days about incompetence and miscalculation. The poisoning was supposed to scare people into submission. Instead, it's driving them to resist. Good, Mara said. He was up and working now, still weak but functional. Let him rage. Angry people make mistakes. He's also planning something. My contact couldn't get details, but Pike's called in enforcers from his Colorado operations. Hard men who specialize in breaking resistance through force. Elias felt ice settle in his stomach. How many men? At least 20, maybe more. They're gathering in Black Hollow, waiting for orders. When? Probably soon. Pike is not patient when he's angry. Ben looked around the room, at Mara, at Josie working on ledgers, at Caleb cleaning his rifle in the corner with grim determination. You folks need to be careful. This is escalating beyond economic pressure. After Ben left, Elias found himself standing on the porch, staring at the ridge road. 20 armed men working for Pike, against 14 ranchers, now 29, who were mostly farmers more comfortable with cattle than combat. The odds were bad. Stop calculating how many men we can field, Mara said, joining him outside. That's not how we win this. Then how do we win? Pike's bringing an army. We make sure he has nobody to use it against. Mara wrapped a blanket tighter against evening cold. Pike's men are hired muscle. They'll fight if there's something to fight. But what if there isn't? What if everyone just disappears? Elias turned to look at her. You're suggesting we abandon the ranches? I'm suggesting we make it impossible for Pike to find targets. Families move to neutral territory. Livestock gets scattered. Properties get locked down and guarded by rotating shifts. Make it too expensive and complicated for Pike's men to accomplish anything. That's defensive. Doesn't solve the underlying problem. No, but it buys time. And time lets us build the one thing Pike can't fight, legal pressure. Mara pulled papers from her pocket. I've been thinking about Pike's debt claim against me, that forged signature. If we can prove it's forged, we undermine his entire legal position. How do we prove forgery? We find the original document and get a handwriting expert to examine it. Pike said it's filed with a lawyer in Denver, so we go to Denver and find it. That's a week's travel each direction. Then we'd better leave soon. Mara met his eyes. I'm not suggesting you go alone. I'm saying we both go. Find the document, prove the forgery, destroy Pike's legal claim. Meanwhile, the network continues under Josie's coordination and Ben's oversight. You want to leave your children here while Pike's men gather in Black Hollow? I want to leave them protected by 29 ranchers who now have personal stake in their safety. And I want to eliminate the legal weapon Pike's been using to threaten me. She turned to face him fully. Elias, we can't just defend forever. Eventually we need to attack. This is how we attack. We dismantle his case, expose his fraud, and turn legal pressure against him instead of toward us. It was risky. It was maybe insane. But Mara's logic made sense. Playing defense against Pike's resources would eventually fail. They needed a fence. We'd need someone to guard the children, Elias said. Someone trustworthy. Ben's wife, Margaret. She's tougher than she looks, and the children like her. And we'd need proof beyond just expert opinion, documentation, witnesses, anything that proves Pike's pattern of fraud. We'll find it. Men like Pike don't commit fraud once. They do it repeatedly. Denver will have records. Mara's voice carried certainty born from desperation. This is our chance. Maybe our only chance. Elias looked at the ridge road again, imagining Pike's hired men riding up that slope with orders to break resistance through force. Then he looked at Mara, battered but unbroken, planning offense while others would curl into defense. We leave Saturday, he said, right after Josie coordinates the big trade exchange. That way Pike's focused on that instead of watching for us to move. Saturday? Mara agreed. They spent Friday preparing. Ben and Margaret agreed to move into the main house, providing security and supervision for the children. Josie received intensive training on handling the weekend's complex trades. Caleb took charge of ranch security, setting up watch rotations with some of the younger ranch hands who'd volunteered to help. You're putting a lot of responsibility on a 12-year-old, Ben observed, watching Caleb organize the security schedule with military precision. He can handle it, Elias said. Kid's been taking care of his family since his father died. This is just making it official. Friday night, Elias gathered the children in the main house for a final conversation. Your mother and I are leaving tomorrow for Denver, he said. We'll be gone about 2 weeks, maybe more. While we're away, Ben and Margaret are in charge. You listen to them like you'd listen to us. Understood? 3 heads nodded. Caleb, you're managing ranch security, but that doesn't mean taking risks. If Pike's men show up, you don't fight. You get everyone to safety and send for help. Your job is protecting people, not being a hero. I understand, Caleb said. Josie, the trade coordination is important but not worth dying for. If anything feels dangerous, you stop immediately and get to safety. The ledgers can wait. Yes, sir. Finn, your job is simplest. Stay close to adults, do what Margaret tells you, and keep Marshall out of trouble. Finn clutched his wooden horse. Can I tell you something? Of course. Marshall says you're going to beat the bad man. He says you and Mama are the bravest people he's ever seen. Elias felt his throat tighten. Marshall's a smart sheriff. After the children went to bed, Mara found Elias on the porch. Having second thoughts? She asked. About 50 of them. You? At least 100, but I'm going anyway. She stood beside him, both of them staring at Wyoming darkness. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why are you doing this? Really doing this, I mean. You could have sent us away the day we arrived, could have avoided all of this. Instead, you're about to ride into potential danger to fight legal battles for a woman you've known barely a month. Elias considered the question. A month ago, the answer would have been about duty or stubbornness or just refusing to bow to Pike's pressure. Now it felt more complicated. When Sarah left, he said slowly, I convinced myself isolation was strength, that needing nobody meant nobody could hurt me. Spent 12 years building walls and calling it wisdom. He paused. Then you showed up with your children, and your bread, and your refusal to beg or bow, and suddenly those walls felt like prisons instead of protection. That's not an answer. I'm doing this because for the first time in 12 years I have something worth fighting for, worth risking for. He looked at her. You and your children changed what this ranch means, changed what I mean. I was barely living before, just surviving day to day, counting time until nothing mattered anymore. Now you have reasons to wake up, Mara finished softly. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. I should tell you something too, about Daniel and me. You don't have to. I do. Because we're about to travel together for 2 weeks, and you deserve honesty. Mara wrapped her arms around herself. Daniel was a good man, but not a smart man. He believed in schemes and opportunities and people's promises. I loved him, but I spent our entire marriage trying to save him from his own optimism. That why you're so cautious now? That's why I'm realistic. Daniel thought the world rewarded good intentions. I learned it rewards preparation and caution. She looked at Elias. With you, I don't have to pretend everything's fine or protect someone from reality. You see the world as clearly as I do. Maybe that's why this partnership works. Partnership? What else would you call it? I coordinate your trade network. You protect my family. We both fight Pike. That's partnership. Elias smiled despite the tension. Fair enough. Partners then. Partners, Mara agreed. Saturday's trade exchange went smoother than anyone expected. Josie managed coordination with remarkable efficiency, matching Mara's organization without the years of experience. Grain moved from Hollister's ranch to 3 different buyers. Chen's cattle shipped to markets Ben had arranged. Equipment reached its destinations on schedule. The network proved it could function without Mara directly managing every detail. Pike's men watched from Black Hollow, but didn't interfere, probably waiting for chaos that never came. By Saturday afternoon, Elias and Mara were on the trail to Denver. They traveled light, 2 horses, minimal supplies, a rifle, and pistol between them. The plan was to move fast and stay unnoticed. The first 2 days passed uneventfully. They rode hard, covering ground at a pace that left little energy for conversation. Nights they camped under open sky, taking turns on watch. Third day, they picked up a tail. Elias spotted the riders around noon, 2 men maintaining distance but matching their pace too consistently to be coincidence. Pike's men? Mara asked when he pointed them out. Probably, keeping track of where we're going. Should we lose them? Not yet. Let them think we're just traveling. Once we're close to Denver, we'll shake them. Elias adjusted his rifle. Right now they're just watching. That's fine. But 4th day, the tale changed. Now it was 4 riders, closer than before, making their presence known, not hiding anymore. 5th day, they made their move. Elias and Mara were watering horses at a creek when the 4 riders approached. Big men, well-armed, wearing the hard expressions of people who'd done violence for money before and would again. That's far enough, Elias called out when they got within 30 yards. The lead rider, heavy beard, scar across his left cheek, grinned. Relax, friend. Just fellow travelers. Fellow travelers don't follow people for 3 days. Smart man. Pike said you were observant. The rider dismounted slowly. Here's the situation. Mr. Pike wants Mrs. Quinn to return to Black Hollow. Settle her debts properly. You can continue to Denver if you want, but she comes with us. No, Mara said flatly. Wasn't asking, ma'am. Was informing. The rider gestured to his companions. We can do this civil or not. Your choice. Elias's hand drifted toward his rifle. 4 against 2. You like those odds? I like them fine, but I also like being paid. Pike's paying us to bring Mrs. Quinn back alive and intact. You he doesn't care about, so think carefully before making this difficult. Silence stretched across the creek bed. Elias calculated angles, distances, chances of both of them surviving a gunfight against 4 armed men. The math looked bad. How much is Pike paying you? Mara asked suddenly. The rider blinked. What? I asked how much Pike's paying. Must be substantial if you're willing to ride this far and risk getting shot. That's between us and Pike. Is it? Because I'm wondering if Pike told you why he wants me back. Whether he mentioned that I have no legal debt to him, that his claim is based on forged documents, and that bringing me back against my will constitutes kidnapping. Don't care about legal details, lady. Care about getting paid. Right, getting paid. Mara stepped forward, hands visible and empty. What if I offered you more? The rider laughed. You're broke, Pike said so. I'm coordinating a trade network worth thousands of dollars in goods and services. I have access to cattle, grain, equipment, supplies Pike can't touch. And I can pay you from that network if you let us continue to Denver. Goods aren't gold, lady. Gold's just another commodity. And out here, cattle and grain spend better than coins. Mara's voice stayed calm, reasonable. Think about it. Pike pays you once for this job, then it's over. But if you work with us, you get ongoing access to supplies, trade goods, connections throughout the territory, which has more long-term value. The rider exchanged glances with his companions. They were thinking about it. We let you go. Pike kills us, one of the other men said. Only if he finds out. And only if he has the resources to spare. By the time we're done in Denver, Pike's going to have bigger problems than tracking down 4 men who decided his money wasn't worth the trouble. Elias watched this play out with growing respect. Mara was negotiating their survival with nothing but words and promises, turning Pike's hired muscle against him through simple economics. The lead writer considered for a long moment. What exactly are you offering? Safe passage to Denver and back, plus $100 worth of trade goods per man, payable when we return to Black Hollow. Cattle, grain, equipment, your choice, and future trading privileges in our network. Mara met his eyes. That's $400 total plus ongoing business. Pike's paying you, what, 50 per man for this job? The writer didn't confirm, but his silence was confirmation enough. Let us pass, Mara continued. Tell Pike we gave you the slip or we had more guards than expected. Whatever story keeps you alive. Then collect from us when this is over. Everyone wins except Pike. Another long silence. Then the writer nodded slowly. $100 in goods, each, payable on your return. He remounted his horse. But if you're lying or if those goods don't materialize, we come back for you. Understood? Understood, Mara said. The 4 riders turned and headed back toward Black Hollow, leaving Elias and Mara alone by the creek. Elias stared at her. Did you just bribe Pike's enforcers with goods we don't technically control? I bribed them with access to a network that will absolutely pay them once we prove Pike's fraud and secure our position. Mara climbed back on her horse. Now let's get to Denver before they change their minds. They rode hard the rest of the day, putting distance between themselves and any second thoughts Pike's men might develop. That night, camped in a ravine that offered some protection, Elias finally spoke what he'd been thinking. That was either brilliant or suicidal. It was necessary. We weren't winning that fight. Mara stirred the fire. And I meant what I said. Those men get paid when we return. I don't make promises I can't keep. Even when keeping them might be complicated? Especially then. Reputation matters. If word gets out that we stiff our agreements, the whole network collapses. She looked at him across the flames. You would have fought them, even with bad odds. Maybe. No, maybe about it. You were calculating angles when I started talking. Mara's expression softened. Thank you for trusting me to handle it. Seemed like you had a plan. I was just trying not to die. She smiled at that, and for a moment the tension eased. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge overhead, both thinking about Denver and what they'd find there. What if the document proves nothing? Elias asked eventually. What if Pike really does have legitimate claim? Then we find another way to fight him. But I don't believe he does. Men like Pike don't operate legitimately. They operate effectively. He forged that signature because legitimate wouldn't work. Mara's voice carried absolute certainty. We just have to prove it. Denver appeared on the 6th day, sprawling and chaotic compared to Black Hollow's rough simplicity. They found lodging at a modest boarding house and started searching for the lawyer Pike had mentioned. It took 3 days of inquiries, bribes, and careful questions before they located him. A sharp-eyed attorney named Harrison, who maintained offices in Denver's legal district. I'm not confirming or denying client information, Harrison said when they finally got a meeting. That's privileged. Even when the client used forged documents, Mara asked. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. Gideon Pike claims my late husband and I signed loan documents agreeing to triple repayment terms. I never signed anything. Never even saw those papers until Pike produced them weeks ago. Do you have proof of forgery? That's why I'm here. Pike told me the original documents are filed with you. I want to see them, have them examined by an expert, and prove the signature isn't mine. Harrison leaned back in his chair. Even if I had such documents, I couldn't release them to you without client permission or court order. Then I'll get a court order. That takes time and money. You have either? Mara's jaw tightened. I have truth. That should count for something. Truth without evidence is just opinion. Harrison stood, moving toward the door. I'm sorry, but unless you have legal standing, how much does Pike pay you to store forged documents? Elias interrupted. How many other people has he done this to? How many signatures have you helped him fake? Harrison stopped. That's slander. It's a question, and judging by your reaction, a relevant one. The lawyer turned, face carefully neutral. You should leave. We will. Right to the territorial marshal's office. File formal fraud complaints, request investigation into Pike's business practices and the lawyers who enable them. Elias stepped closer. Unless you'd prefer to cooperate now, before this becomes public scandal. Harrison's calculation was visible on his face, weighing loyalty to Pike against self-preservation. I maintain Pike's legal documents as contracted, he said carefully. What those documents contain or how they were created isn't my responsibility. But you know they're forged. I know nothing. I file papers and collect fees. Harrison moved back to his desk. However, if someone were to petition the court for access to those documents as part of formal fraud investigation, and if that petition were granted, I'd be legally obligated to comply. How long does petition and approval take? Weeks, normally. Unless the petitioner has compelling evidence of imminent harm or ongoing criminal enterprise, then it can be expedited, days instead of weeks. Mara caught Elias's eye. We have evidence of poisoning, economic manipulation, and attempted kidnapping. Does that count as imminent harm? Harrison almost smiled. I imagine it might, to the right judge. They left Harrison's office with clear direction. File formal petition with supporting evidence, get a sympathetic judge to expedite approval, force Harrison to produce Pike's documents for examination. It took 4 more days of legal maneuvering, testimonies, and strategic pressure. But finally, they stood in a Denver courthouse watching a handwriting expert examine the loan document alongside verified samples of Mara's signature. The expert's conclusion came swift and certain. This signature is forged. Same person signed both names, trying to disguise handwriting for the second signature. But pressure patterns, letter formation, and stroke consistency all indicate single authorship. He pointed to specific details. See here. The capital Q in Quinn shows identical formation characteristics to the signature purported to be Daniel Quinn's. Same hand wrote both. Can you testify to that in legal proceedings? Elias asked. I can and will. This is clear-cut forgery. The judge, an older woman named Thompson who'd heard their petition, examined the evidence herself before speaking. This court finds sufficient cause to believe fraud has occurred. Mrs. Quinn, your debt claim is suspended pending full investigation. Mr. Harrison, you're ordered to surrender all documents related to Gideon Pike's loan operations for review. And someone get the territorial marshal in here. We're filing criminal fraud charges. Walking out of the courthouse, Mara stopped on the steps and just breathed. It's over, she said quietly. The debt's gone. Pike can't claim I owe him anything. The debt's gone, Elias agreed. But Pike's still dangerous, and now he's going to be furious. Let him be furious. We have law on our side now. Documentation, expert testimony, judicial ruling. He can't fight that. He can try. Men like Pike don't accept defeat gracefully. Mara turned to face him. Then we'll beat him again, and again after that if necessary, because I'm done running and I'm done being scared. They started the return journey the next morning, traveling faster now, with legal victory secured. The trip back should have felt triumphant. Instead, Elias couldn't shake growing unease. Pike had too much to lose, and desperate men did desperate things. His worry proved justified on the 8th day of return travel. They were within half a day's ride of Black Hollow when they spotted smoke rising from the direction of the ridge. Thick black smoke. Too much smoke for a campfire. Elias spurred his horse faster, dread building with every mile. Mara kept pace beside him, face pale but determined. They crested the final rise and saw it. The ranch was burning, not the main house. Elias's heart hammered as they thundered down the ridge road, close enough now to see details through the smoke. The barn was burning, flames consuming dry wood with terrifying speed. The bunkhouse showed scorch marks but stood intact. The main house looked untouched. People moved in the yard, too many to count at distance, some fighting the fire, others standing in defensive positions with rifles. Elias and Mara rode straight into chaos. Ben Hollister spotted them first, running over as they dismounted. His face was streaked with soot, clothes singed, eyes wild with adrenaline and exhaustion. "Thank Christ you're back," he gasped out. "We've been holding them off for 2 days." "The children?" Mara demanded, grabbing his arm. "Where are my children?" "Safe. In the main house with Margaret. Everyone's accounted for." Ben gestured toward the burning barn. "Pike's men hit us yesterday morning. Tried to burn everything, drive us off the property. We fought them back, but they torched the barn before we could stop them." Elias stared at the inferno that had been his barn. 12 years of stored hay, equipment, tools, all burning. Cattle bellowed in panicked confusion from the far pastures where someone had managed to move them. "How many men did Pike send?" he asked. "Started with 15. We drove off about half. The rest are holed up near the North Ridge, regrouping. They'll come again." Ben wiped sweat and soot from his face. "We've got maybe 20 ranchers here now, all armed, but Pike's men are professionals. They know what they're doing." "Casualties?" "3 wounded, none serious. We've been lucky." Ben's expression darkened. "But they're not just attacking your ranch. They hit Hollister's place too. Scattered my cattle, burned my feed storage. Jack Moreland's missing 30 head. Pike's going after everyone in the network." Mara was already running toward the main house. Elias followed, leaving Ben to coordinate the firefighting. They burst through the door to find Margaret Hollister standing guard with a shotgun, while Josie, Caleb, and Finn huddled at the kitchen table. Finn saw Mara first and launched himself at her. She caught him, held him tight, then pulled Josie and Caleb into the embrace. All 3 children talking at once, words tumbling over each other in relieved chaos. "Pike's men came in the night." Caleb sounded the alarm. "We hid, like you said." Marshall was very brave. Mara quieted them with a gesture, checking each child for injuries with shaking hands. Finding none, she finally allowed herself to breathe. "You're safe," she whispered. "You're all safe." "For now," Margaret said grimly. "But those men aren't done. They'll regroup and come harder next time." Elias moved to the window, assessing the situation outside. The barn fire was starting to die down, nothing left to burn but embers and ash. Ranchers maintained defensive positions around the property perimeter, but they looked exhausted. 2 days of fighting would do that. "Where's Pike?" he asked Margaret. "In Black Hollow, according to reports. Sitting comfortable while his hired guns do the dirty work. Smart, keeps him separated from the violence legally." Margaret set down her shotgun. "But everyone knows he's behind it. Even people who were scared of him before are getting angry now. Burning buildings crosses lines." Caleb appeared at Elias's side. The boy looked older somehow, face hard with experience nobody his age should have. "I did what you said," Caleb reported. "Got everyone to safety first, then organized defense. We saved most of the cattle and all the horses. Just lost the barn and what was inside." "You did good," Elias said, meaning it. "Better than most grown men would have." "Doesn't feel good. Feels like we barely survived." "That's because we did barely survive, but barely counts." Elias gripped the boy's shoulder. "Thank you for protecting your family." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Pride mixing with relief, mixing with exhaustion. "Are we going to fight back now, or keep defending?" "We fight back, but smart, not reckless." Elias turned to Mara. "We need to end this, fast, before Pike's men regroup and hit us again." "Agreed. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Pike's in Black Hollow giving orders while his men do the bleeding. Time to reverse that. Make him face consequences personally instead of hiding behind hired violence." Mara studied him. "You want to go after Pike directly?" "I want to force him into open. Expose what he's doing, make it impossible for him to operate from safety." Elias looked around the room, at Margaret, at the children, at the ranch burning outside. "He thinks he can break us through intimidation and violence. I want him to understand he's wrong." Ben entered, breathing hard. "Fire's controlled. We didn't lose anything else. But scouts report Pike's men are moving again, coming back from the North Ridge. Maybe an hour before they're in position." "How many?" 8 that we can see. Could be more in reserve." 8 professional fighters against 20 exhausted ranchers. The math wasn't good, but it wasn't impossible either. "We need to shift strategy," Elias said. "Stop defending and start attacking." "Attack how? We're ranchers, not soldiers." "Exactly. We use what we know, the land, the terrain, the fact that we're fighting for our homes while they're fighting for wages." Elias moved to the table, pulling a rough map from memory. "Pike's men are coming from the North Ridge. That route has 3 natural choke points where small numbers can hold against larger forces. We fortify those positions, turn their advance into a killing ground." "You're talking about ambush," Margaret said quietly. "I'm talking about making it too expensive for Pike to continue. His men are hired. They'll fight for money, but not die for it. We make the cost too high, they'll break. Ben nodded slowly. Could work. If we position correctly and don't break when they push back, then let's not break. Elias looked at each person in the room. Get the word out to everyone defending this property. We're done being victims. Time to make Pike's men regret taking his money. Over the next hour, they transformed defense into offense. Ranchers moved to the 3 choke points Elias had identified, rocky outcroppings that created natural barriers, forcing Pike's men into narrow approaches where numbers mattered less than position. Frank Chen took the western position with 5 men. Jack Moreland fortified the eastern approach with 6. Ben held the center with 7, leaving Elias free to coordinate and respond to whichever position needed reinforcement. Mara insisted on staying in the fight despite Elias's protests. You're injured, exhausted from travel, and have 3 children depending on you, he argued, which is exactly why I'm fighting. Those children need a mother who doesn't bow to thugs. She checked her rifle with practiced efficiency. I can shoot. Daniel taught me before he died. And I'm not hiding while everyone else risks their lives defending what we've built. Margaret volunteered to watch the children, positioning herself in the main house with strict orders to barricade inside if things went wrong. Josie hugged her mother hard before letting go. Come back, she whispered. I will, Mara promised. Keep your brothers safe. They took positions just as Pike's men appeared on the north ridge. 8 riders moving with military precision, splitting into 3 groups to attack all approaches simultaneously. Smart tactics from people who knew their business. But smart tactics hit hard terrain and desperate defenders. The western approach went first. Pike's men rode into the rocky outcropping expecting scattered resistance. Instead, they found Frank Chen and 5 ranchers dug into cover with clear sight lines. The first volley of rifle fire dropped 2 horses and sent the riders scrambling for shelter. Eastern approach went similarly. Jack Moreland's group held elevated position, raining fire down on attackers trying to navigate narrow passages between boulders. One of Pike's men took a bullet in the leg, another lost his hat and his nerves simultaneously. The center position held by Ben became the main battle. 4 of Pike's men concentrated there, bringing superior firepower and tactical experience. They advanced methodically, using covering fire and coordinated movement. Ben's group held but barely, forced backward step by step. Elias saw it developing from his position and moved to reinforce, bringing Mara and 2 other ranchers. They hit Pike's men from the side, catching them focused forward instead of watching flanks. The tide shifted. Suddenly, Pike's professional fighters found themselves surrounded, outnumbered, taking fire from multiple directions. One of them, the man with the scarred cheek who'd tried to capture Mara near Denver, shouted orders to fall back. They retreated in controlled fashion, covering each other, not broken, but definitely bloodied. 2 of their number limped badly. Another clutched a wounded arm. The ranchers didn't pursue. They held their positions, watching Pike's men withdraw toward Black Hollow. When the dust settled, Ben approached Elias with grim satisfaction. We held. They're falling back. For now. They'll regroup, bring more men, try again. Elias scanned the battlefield, empty shell casings, blood trails, scattered equipment. We hurt them, but we didn't break them. We proved they can be hurt. That's something. It's not enough. Pike still has resources, money, men to hire. We've got ranchers who need to sleep eventually. Elias looked toward Black Hollow, invisible beyond the ridgeline but present like a weight. This ends when Pike ends. When he's broken, or gone, or dead. Nothing else solves it. Mara joined them, rifle still in hand, face set with determination. Then we go to Black Hollow, confront him publicly, force him to answer for what he's done. He won't answer. He'll hide behind lawyers and deny everything. Not if we bring proof. Not if we bring witnesses. Not if we make it impossible for him to deny. Mara's voice gained strength. We have the forged documents from Denver. We have testimony about the poisoning. We have evidence of arson and assault. That's enough to arrest him if the right authorities get involved. The territorial marshal's 3 days away, Ben said, and Pike probably has him bought anyway. Then we go over his head. Federal marshals, territorial judges, anyone with jurisdiction Pike hasn't corrupted yet. Mara looked between Ben and Elias. We can't just defend forever. We need to attack his legitimacy, his reputation, his ability to operate, destroy what makes him powerful. She was right. Elias knew she was right. But going after Pike directly meant risk to themselves, to everyone involved, to the fragile network they'd built. It also meant ending this before more people got hurt. "We need a plan," he said finally. "Something that exposes Pike publicly, brings legal pressure he can't evade, and protects us from retaliation." "I might have something," a new voice said. They turned to find Tom Brennan approaching from the main house, looking uncomfortable but determined. The old trader rarely left Black Hollow, and never without reason. "Tom," Ben said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "Heard about the attack. Figured you folks could use information." Tom pulled papers from his coat. "I've been keeping records. Every time Pike pressured a merchant, manipulated prices, threatened businesses, dates, names, amounts, everything." Elias took the papers, scanning quickly. Pages and pages of documented abuse, merchants forced to raise prices on Mercer-allied ranchers, suppliers cut off from customers who opposed Pike, businesses ruined for refusing cooperation. "This is extensive," Elias said. "Why keep records?" "Because eventually someone would stand up to him. Figured they'd need proof." Tom met his eyes. "You folks are the first to actually fight back instead of fold. Seemed like time to make the records useful." Mara examined the documents. "This is leverage, real leverage. Combined with our evidence from Denver, this paints a picture of systematic fraud and intimidation. No judge could ignore this." "Getting it to a judge is the problem," Ben pointed out. "Pike's got influence. He'll block access, delay proceedings, make everything complicated." "Not if we go public first," Mara said. "Bring the evidence to a town meeting. Present it to everyone, merchants, ranchers, residents. Make it impossible to suppress or ignore. Then demand the territorial marshal act on it." "Town meetings can be controlled," Tom warned. "Pike owns the mayor. He'll shut down anything that threatens him. Then we don't ask permission. We take over the meeting, force the issue before Pike can stop it." Mara's eyes blazed with the same intensity she'd shown negotiating with Pike's hired guns. "Sunday there's a regular community gathering at the trading post. Everyone attends. We show up with our evidence, our witnesses, and our demands. Make Pike defend himself in front of everyone." Elias considered it. Bold, risky, possibly insane, also possibly their best chance. "Pike will have men there," he said. "Security, enforcers, people ready to shut us down violently if needed." "Then we bring more men. Every rancher in the network, every merchant Tom's documented, everyone Pike's hurt over the years. Overwhelm him with numbers and public sentiment." Mara turned to Ben. "Can you organize that? Get word to everyone?" "I can try, but some folks will be too scared to show. Pike's got long reach." "Then we work with who we have. Fear's kept him powerful this long. Time to break that fear publicly." They spent Saturday preparing. Riders went to every ranch in the network, every merchant Tom identified, everyone with grievance against Pike. The message was simple. Sunday noon at the trading post, bring your testimony and your courage. Time to end Pike's control. Response was mixed. Some people committed immediately, anger overcoming fear. Others refused, too intimidated to risk Pike's retaliation. A few wanted to help, but worried about family safety. By Saturday night, they had commitments from 18 ranchers, 7 merchants, and a handful of citizens who'd been quietly suffering under Pike's economic pressure. Not overwhelming numbers, but enough to make noise. Elias spent the night reviewing their evidence, organizing testimony, preparing for every argument Pike might raise. Mara worked beside him, drafting a formal presentation that laid out Pike's crimes in clear, undeniable terms. Around midnight, she set down her pen and looked at him. "This could go wrong," she said quietly. "Pike could have us arrested, could turn the crowd against us, could respond with violence we can't match." "I know. We could lose everything. The ranch, the network, our freedom, possibly our lives." "I know that too." Elias met her eyes. "But we're out of other options. Defending isn't working. Running isn't working. This is what's left." Mara nodded slowly. "Then let's make it count." Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. They rode to Black Hollow in a group. Elias and Mara, Ben and Margaret, Tom Brennan, and a dozen ranchers armed with rifles and determination. The children stayed at the ranch under guard, Caleb in charge with strict instructions to flee to the Hollister place if Pike's men returned. Black Hollow's trading post stood at the settlement's center, a large log building that served as general store, meeting hall, and social hub. By the time they arrived, maybe 40 people had already gathered for the regular Sunday meeting. More filtered in as noon approached. Ranchers, merchants, families. Some came from curiosity. Others came because they'd heard something important was happening. A few came because they'd been summoned by Pike and didn't know why. Pike himself arrived at 11:30, flanked by 6 men who looked more like soldiers than ranch hands. He wore expensive clothes and an expression of bored confidence, like a man attending an event he knew he controlled. He spotted Elias and Mara immediately. His expression shifted. Surprise, then calculation, then something harder. "Mercer," he called across the crowd. "Didn't expect to see you here. Heard your barn burned down. Terrible accident." "Wasn't an accident and you know it," Elias said loudly enough for others to hear. Conversation stopped. People turned to watch. Pike smiled. "Careful making accusations you can't prove. Slander's a serious crime in the territory. So is fraud, and arson, and attempted murder." Elias stepped forward, voice carrying to every corner of the trading post. "Which is what we're here to discuss." The mayor, a thin, nervous man named Cooper, who everyone knew answered to Pike, tried to intervene. "This is a regular community meeting," Cooper stammered. "Not a courtroom. If you have grievances, take them to proper authorities." "We tried proper authorities. They're either bought or too far away to help. So we're bringing our case to the community instead." Elias gestured to Mara. "Mrs. Quinn, if you would." Mara stepped forward, holding the documents they'd prepared. Her voice rang clear and steady. "Gideon Pike claims I owe him $4,500 based on documents my late husband allegedly signed. Those documents are forged. We have expert testimony from Denver confirming the signature attributed to me was written by the same hand that signed my husband's name. The debt is fraudulent." Pike's expression didn't change, but his men shifted positions slightly. "That's a lie. I have legal documents properly filed and witnessed. You have forged papers filed with a corrupt lawyer who's now under investigation by territorial authorities." Mara held up the expert's report. "This is certified analysis from a court-recognized handwriting specialist. Your debt claim is worthless." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People were listening now, engaged. "Furthermore," Mara continued, "Pike poisoned me when I refused to work off this fake debt. I have medical testimony from Dr. Garrett confirming deliberate poisoning with plant-based toxin. Pike attempted to murder me for refusing to pay money I don't owe." More murmurs, louder now. Pike's smile had frozen. Tom Brennan stepped forward next, holding his records. "I've documented systematic economic manipulation by Pike over the past 5 years. Merchants forced to raise prices on specific customers. Supply chains deliberately disrupted. Businesses ruined for refusing cooperation. All of it traceable back to Pike's organization." He began reading examples, dates, names, specific incidents. Each one drew reactions from the crowd as people recognized their own experiences. The mayor tried again to shut things down. "This is inappropriate. If you have evidence of crimes, present it to the marshal." "The marshal won't act because Pike owns him," Ben Hollister said, standing. "Same way he owns you, Cooper. Everyone here knows it. Pike's had this town under his thumb for years through money and fear. But fear stops working when people finally stand together." "I own nothing and no one," Pike said, voice hard now. "I run legitimate businesses. If people can't compete or manage their debts, that's not my fault." "You hired men to burn my barn," Elias said, "to scatter cattle, attack ranchers, drive us off our properties. That's not legitimate business. That's terrorism." "Prove it. Show me one person who'll testify they saw my men commit these supposed crimes." Frank Chen stood. "I'll testify. Pike's men scattered my herd and burned my feed storage." Jack Moreland stood next. "I'll testify. Lost 30 head to deliberate stampede organized by Pike's hired guns." One by one, ranchers stood, then merchants, then citizens, each adding their testimony to the growing weight of evidence. Pike's control had touched too many people, hurt too many families. Now they were speaking publicly for the first time. Pike watched it happen with barely controlled fury. His men fingered their weapons nervously, but even they could read the room. 30 people standing in testimony against one man, with more listening and clearly sympathetic. "You're all lying," Pike said. "Coordinated slander campaign by people who can't succeed legitimately." "Then take us to court," Mara challenged. "Let a judge hear the evidence, examine the documents, listen to testimony. If we're lying, prove it legally." "I don't have to prove anything. You're the accusers. Burden of proof is yours. We have proof, documented, certified, witnessed proof. Mara held up the stack of evidence. What we don't have is a legal system free from your corruption. So we're doing this publicly instead, letting everyone see what you've done and demanding they choose. Stand with Pike or stand against him. The crowd was fully engaged now, people talking among themselves, taking sides, the tension building like pressure before a storm. Pike's lead enforcer, the scarred man from earlier encounters, leaned close and whispered something. Pike nodded, then addressed the room with forced calm. This is all very dramatic, but it's also pointless. I have legal counsel, business documentation, and resources you can't match. You want to fight me in court? Fine. Bring your so-called evidence. I'll bury you in legal fees before you get near a judge. He smiled coldly. And while we're fighting legal battles, I'll continue operating my businesses as I see fit, including collecting on legitimate debts and defending my property interests. Your property interests don't include other people's ranches, Elias said. Don't they? I hold deeds and liens on half the properties in this territory, purchased legally when owners defaulted on obligations to me. Pike's smile widened. Including, as of yesterday, the deed to Mercer Ranch. Silence crashed across the room. Elias felt ice form in his chest. What? You defaulted on a loan taken out 3 years ago with Black Hollow Bank. The bank sold me the debt last month. You missed 2 payments during your little trip to Denver. That constitutes default under territorial law. The property reverts to me. Pike produced a document from his coat. All legal, all proper. Your ranch is mine now. Mara grabbed Elias's arm before he could move. That's impossible. Elias doesn't have loans with the bank. Actually, he does. Took it out in 1873 for ranch improvements, small monthly payments. He's been making them regularly until recently. Pike handed the document to the mayor. Cooper, you're notary public. Verify this for the crowd. Cooper examined the papers with shaking hands. It looks legitimate. Loan agreement, payment history, default notice. All properly executed. I never took out a loan, Elias said, voice dangerous. That's another forgery. No, it's real. I have the original signed application at the bank. Your signature, your property as collateral. All documented. Pike's triumph was evident now. You can claim forgery all you want, but proving it takes time you don't have. As of yesterday, I own Mercer Ranch. You're trespassing on my property. The crowd erupted in noise, arguments, accusations, shock. Pike had just demonstrated exactly what they'd been accusing him of, but he'd done it with apparent legal legitimacy that was hard to immediately challenge. Elias's mind raced. He'd never taken out a loan, but proving that meant examining documents, getting experts involved, fighting legal battles that would take months. Meanwhile, Pike could evict him, seize the property, destroy everything they'd built. Unless they stopped him now. You forged that loan same as you forged Mara's debt, Elias said. Same pattern, same crime, and everyone here knows it. Knowing and proving are different things, Pike gestured to his men. I'm asking you nicely to vacate my property. Don't make this difficult. You want the ranch? Come take it. Elias stepped forward, hand near his pistol. But you'll have to go through me and every rancher here to get it. Pike's men moved their hands to their weapons. The crowd backed away, sensing violence about to break. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Nobody's taking anything. Everyone turned. A man stood in the trading post doorway, tall, weathered, wearing a badge that caught lamplight. The territorial marshal had arrived. Pike's expression went carefully neutral. Marshal Davies wasn't expecting you. Clearly. Davies stepped inside, 2 deputies flanking him. Got a telegraph from Denver 3 days ago about fraud investigation involving Gideon Pike. Seemed worth investigating personally. I'm sure this is just misunderstanding. Save it, Pike. I've been reviewing the evidence Mrs. Quinn sent ahead. Forged signatures, expert testimony, documented pattern of fraud. Enough for me to obtain warrants. Davies produced papers from his coat. Gideon Pike, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Anything you say can be used against you in territorial court. Pike's men started to reach for weapons, but Davies' deputies already had rifles trained on them. Don't, Davies warned. You're hired help. Walk away now and you're clear. Fight, and you're accessories to federal crimes. The scarred man calculated for maybe 3 seconds, then stepped back, hands visible. The other men followed his lead. Pike stood alone, fury and shock warring on his face. "This is illegal detention," he managed. "I have rights. You have the right to shut up until we get to Denver, where a federal judge will hear the charges." Davies gestured to his deputies. "Cuff him." As they took Pike into custody, the trading post erupted in chaos. People talking over each other, some celebrating, others still processing what had happened. The man who'd controlled Black Hollow through fear and money was being arrested in front of everyone. Davies approached Elias and Mara as his deputies secured Pike. "Got your telegraph from Denver," he said quietly. "Evidence you sent was compelling. Enough for federal interest, especially combined with reports I'd already received about Pike's operations. Been building a case for months, just waiting for the right moment." "We gave you that moment," Mara said. "You gave me what I needed to move. Without your evidence and public testimony, Pike could have fought this for years." Davies tipped his hat. "Thank you for your courage." He left with his prisoner, leaving the trading post in stunned silence. Pike was gone. Actually, truly gone. Elias felt the weight of months, maybe years, lift from his shoulders. The ranch was safe. Mara and her children were safe. The network they'd built could function without fear of economic retaliation. They'd won. Ben clapped him on the back. "We did it. We actually did it." "We did," Elias agreed, looking at Mara. She met his eyes, and something passed between them. Relief, triumph, and bone-deep exhaustion all mixed together. "Let's go home," she said. They rode back to the ranch as sunset painted the Wyoming sky gold and orange. The burned barn stood as reminder of what they'd endured, but the main house glowed with lamplight where the children waited. Finn saw them first and ran out. Marshall held high. "You beat the bad man, Marshall said you would." The children swarmed them, questions, hugs, excited chatter about everything that had happened. Elias stood back and watched Mara reunite with her family, feeling something warm and unfamiliar in his chest. Later, after the children finally went to bed and the ranch settled into quiet, Elias found Mara on the porch. "We should talk about what comes next," he said. "Next?" "Pike's gone. The threat's over. You said back when you arrived that this wasn't permanent, that you'd leave once you had money saved and a plan." He looked at her. "So what's the plan now?" Mara was quiet for a long moment, watching stars emerge overhead. "I don't have one," she finally said. "Spent so long running and surviving that I never thought past escaping Pike. Now that he's gone, I don't know what comes next. You could stay, here, I mean, at the ranch. As your cook? As my partner." The words came out before Elias fully thought them through, but he didn't take them back. "You've been managing the trade network, organizing the community, keeping this whole operation functioning. That's not cooking. That's running a business. Our business." "Our business," Mara repeated softly. "If you want it to be, if you want to stay." Elias paused. "I know we started as strangers. I know this arrangement was supposed to be temporary, but somewhere between bread and battles and building something together, it stopped feeling temporary. At least for me." Mara turned to face him fully. "You're saying you want us to stay permanently. I'm saying I can't imagine this ranch without you anymore, without your children, without the noise and chaos and life you brought with you." He met her eyes. "I spent 12 years alone convinced that was strength. You taught me it was just fear. I don't want to go back to that." She smiled, real and warm. "The children are already planning where to build the new barn. Josie's drawn up designs. Caleb's calculated lumber costs. Even Finn's convinced Marshall needs a proper stable. That a yes?" "That's a yes. We're staying, Elias. If you'll have us." "I'll have you," he said. "All of you." She kissed him then, quick and certain, sealing the decision. Behind them, the ranch that had been a fortress of isolation transformed into something else entirely. A home. A family. A future built on partnership instead of solitude. The barn could be rebuilt, the network could grow, the community could thrive. And for the first time in 12 years, Elias Mercer felt something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. The kiss lasted maybe 3 seconds before Finn's voice interrupted from the doorway. "Does this mean you're getting married?" Elias and Mara broke apart to find all 3 children watching from inside the house, Josie and Caleb looking embarrassed while Finn beamed with 5-year-old enthusiasm. "We're supposed to be asleep," Caleb said, shooting his younger brother a look. Marshall wanted to know what was happening, Finn said defensively. Mara laughed, the sound carrying relief and joy mixed together. Marshall's very curious, isn't he? He says when people kiss on porches at night, it usually means weddings are coming. Finn looked between them expectantly. So are they? Elias felt his face heat up. He'd just confessed feelings he'd barely admitted to himself, kissed a woman in front of Starlight, and now 3 children wanted wedding plans. That's a conversation for another time, Mara said diplomatically. Right now, you 3 need to be in bed. We've all had enough excitement for one day. But, Finn started, bed, now. Mara's voice carried mother authority that even Marshall couldn't argue with. The children retreated, though Josie looked back with a knowing smile that made Elias distinctly uncomfortable. When had the 10-year-old gotten so perceptive? After they'd gone, Mara turned back to him. Sorry about that, Finn has no sense of timing. He asked a fair question, Elias said. We should probably figure out the answer. Are you proposing? Because if you are, that was possibly the most unromantic proposal in Wyoming history. I wasn't. Elias stopped, regrouped. I'm saying we should talk about what this means, what we're doing, where it's going. Mara studied him in the dim light filtering from inside. What do you want it to mean? I want you to stay. I want the children here. I want to rebuild the barn together and keep the network running and wake up to your coffee every morning for the rest of my life. He paused. Is that clear enough? It's clear. Still not particularly romantic, but clear. She smiled. I want those things too. But I also want to do them right. Not rushed because we survived something terrible. Not because the children are asking or the neighbors expect it, because we actually choose it deliberately. How long does deliberate choosing take? However long it needs to. We've known each other 2 months, Elias. 2 months of crisis and fighting and barely surviving. Maybe we should see what we're like when nobody's trying to poison me or burn your property. She had a point. Their entire relationship had formed under pressure. What if peace changed things? What if the connection they felt was just proximity and shared danger? But even as he thought it, Elias knew better. The way Mara organized chaos into order, the way she argued with him instead of deferring, the way she'd stood in a burning ranch yard coordinating defense like a general. Those weren't crisis-born attractions. Those were fundamentals. All right, he said, we take time. Figure out what this looks like without Pike as common enemy. But the offer stands. Stay as long as you want. Partners in business for certain. Partners in everything else if and when it feels right. Partners, Mara agreed and kissed him again, slower this time. The next weeks brought changes that felt seismic after months of constant crisis. Pike's arrest sent shockwaves through the territory. His business empire began crumbling as investigations revealed fraud reaching back years. Properties he'd claimed ownership of reverted to original owners. Debts he'd manufactured dissolved under legal scrutiny. The man who'd controlled Black Hollow through money and fear faced federal charges that would likely keep him imprisoned for decades. The rancher network Mara had organized evolved from crisis response into permanent cooperative. What had started as desperate defense against Pike became something more substantial, a trading system that benefited everyone involved. Ranchers shared equipment, coordinated sales, extended credit to each other. The barter economy proved more resilient than anyone expected. Mara managed it from Mercer Ranch, which became informal headquarters for the whole operation. The kitchen table that had once held only Elias's cold coffee now hosted meetings involving a dozen ranchers discussing grain prices and cattle futures. The yard that had echoed with emptiness now rang with voices, wagon wheels, the constant movement of commerce. Elias found himself enjoying the chaos, or at least tolerating it better than he'd expected. His ranch wasn't isolated sanctuary anymore. It was hub, center, gathering place. That should have driven him mad. Instead, it felt right. The barn rebuilding started in late March. Ben Hollister organized a work party, 20 ranchers showing up with tools and lumber, turning reconstruction into community event. They raised the frame in 2 days, working with the kind of coordinated efficiency that came from people who'd fought together. Caleb worked alongside the men, no longer treated as child, but as equal. Somewhere between defending the ranch and proving his competence, the boy had earned respect. He wielded hammer and saw with confidence, taking instructions from older ranchers without the defensive pride Elias remembered from early weeks. "Your boy's got talent," Ben commented, watching Caleb measure lumber with careful precision. "Good head for construction. Could apprentice with a builder if he wanted." "He's not my boy," Elias said automatically, then stopped. Was that true anymore? Legally, sure, but in practice? Caleb called him by name, took his advice, worked his land. When had the distinction stopped mattering? "Could have fooled me," Ben said. "Kid looks at you like a father. Acts like one around you too, trying to impress you, seeking your approval. That's not hired help behavior." Elias had noticed it, but hadn't let himself think too hard about implications. Becoming a father figure meant responsibility, meant permanence, meant admitting he'd let these people become family. That night, he found Caleb working late on his whittling project, something he'd been carving for weeks with secretive intensity. "What are you making?" Elias asked. Caleb looked up, startled, then shrugged. "Just something." "Can I see?" The boy hesitated, then held up his work. It was a wooden horse, more detailed than Finn's crude martial. This one had carved musculature, flowing mane, power captured in wood. "That's impressive work," Elias said, meaning it. "Who taught you to carve like that?" "My father." Before the mine, Caleb's voice went quiet. He used to make things. Said working with his hands helped him think. I wanted to remember that part of him. The good parts worth remembering? The parts before he started trusting wrong people and making bad deals. Caleb set down the carving. I don't want to be like him. Don't want to believe everyone's honest and every opportunity's real. Want to see things clearly. Seeing things clearly is important, but so is trusting sometimes. Your father's mistake wasn't trust. It was who he trusted, and not verifying claims. Elias sat down beside him. There's middle ground between naive optimism and total suspicion. You found that middle ground? Still working on it. Spent 12 years too far on the suspicion side. Your mother's helping me balance better. He paused. You're helping too. You and your sisters and Finn, teaching me what's worth risking for. Caleb looked at him with those two old eyes. Are you going to marry my mother? Probably. Eventually, when the timing's right and she's ready. Elias met the boy's gaze. Does that bother you? No. Just wondering what it means for us, for me and Josie and Finn. What do you want it to mean? Caleb thought about that for a long moment. I want it to mean we're not temporary anymore, that we don't have to worry about leaving or being sent away, that this is actually home. It is home. Marriage or not, legal arrangements or not, you're not leaving unless you choose to. Elias put weight behind the words. You have my word on that. For whatever a stubborn rancher's word is worth, something loosened in Caleb's posture. Your word's worth plenty. You've proven that. After he left, Elias sat alone thinking about promises and family and the strange way life rearranged itself when you stopped fighting change. The wedding happened on a Sunday in June, not because of grand planning or romantic timing, but because Josie announced one morning that waiting was stupid and adults overthought simple things. You love each other, she said, with 10-year-old certainty. Mama's happy here. You're happy with us. Why wait? Marriage is complicated, Mara tried to explain. No, it's simple. You decide to be family officially instead of just acting like it. Then you have a party. Josie looked at them both. Unless you don't want to get married? Because that's fine too, but stop pretending you're waiting for perfect timing. There's no such thing. Out of the mouths of children came uncomfortable truth. Elias and Mara looked at each other. She has a point, Elias said. She usually does. It's infuriating. Mara smiled. All right, let's do it. Simple ceremony, nothing fancy, just making official what already is. They married in the ranch yard under open sky with 30 neighbors as witnesses. Ben Hollister stood as best man. Margaret held Finn when he got restless. Josie cried, which surprised everyone, including herself. Caleb presented the wooden horse he'd been carving. A wedding gift, he explained, for the ranch that had become home. The ceremony took 10 minutes. The circuit judge who'd agreed to officiate kept things brief and legal. Elias wore his cleanest shirt. Mara wore a simple dress Margaret had helped her make. No flowers, no music, no elaborate traditions, just two people choosing partnership in front of witnesses who'd helped them survive. When the judge pronounced them married, Finn cheered so loudly, Marshall probably heard it in the barn. The celebration afterward involved more food than Elias had seen since before Pike's War. Every rancher brought something: pies, roasted meat, fresh bread, jugs of questionable homebrew. Tables appeared in the yard, filled faster than seemed possible. People ate and talked and celebrated not just a wedding, but survival. They'd stood together against Pike. They'd built something functional from crisis cooperation. This marriage felt like culmination, proof they'd moved beyond just defending into actually living. Late in the evening, while others danced to fiddle music someone had produced, Elias found himself standing with Tom Brennan watching the celebration. "Never thought I'd see this ranch hosting a party," Tom said. Elias Mercer, the hermit of Black Hollow Ridge, surrounded by people celebrating. Life's full of surprises. That it is. Good ones sometimes. Tom took a sip of homebrew, grimaced. "Jack Moreland's stuff gets worse every year. He's better at cattle than brewing." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Finn chase other children through the crowd, while Marshall led the charge. Josie helped Margaret serve food with adult efficiency. Caleb talked with Ben about construction techniques, absorbed in technical discussion. "Those children think you're their father now," Tom observed. "Know that, right?" "I'm aware." "You ready for that? Fatherhood's not small responsibility." Elias thought about Caleb's questions, Josie's perceptiveness, Finn's absolute trust. "I wasn't ready for any of this. Not the wife, not the children, not the community organizing or the network coordination, but ready or not, it's what I've got. Might as well do it properly." "That's the spirit, reluctant acceptance," Tom laughed. "Seriously though, you're doing all right, better than all right. You gave those kids stability when they needed it. That counts for something." Later, Mara found him as the party wound down, guests beginning to depart with promises to visit soon. "Successful wedding?" she asked. "I think so. Nobody got shot, the homebrew didn't blind anyone, and we're legally married. Seems successful." "Your standards are remarkably low." "I spent 12 years alone eating hardtack for dinner. My standards have been low for a while." He looked at her. "But this, tonight, the ranch, the life we're building, this is raising those standards considerably." Mara took his hand. "Good. You deserve higher standards." "So do you. You and the children. You deserve stability and safety and home that doesn't disappear." "We have that now, thanks to you." "Thanks to us," Elias corrected. "I provided the property. You provided the courage to fight for it. Equal partnership, remember?" "Equal partnership," she agreed. Over the following months, the ranch transformed in ways both visible and subtle. The new barn stood taller than the old one, with better ventilation and storage space designed by Caleb's careful planning. Mara's trade network expanded to include settlements beyond Black Hollow, creating economic connections that benefited entire region. The bunkhouse became office space for managing increasingly complex cooperative operations. The main house grew louder. Josie established a study area where she practiced the bookkeeping she'd learned managing trades during crisis. Caleb built furniture in the barn workshop, developing skills that exceeded simple ranch work. Finn filled the house with constant questions, stories, imaginary adventures involving Marshall, and an ever-expanding cast of wooden characters. Elias learned to live with noise. More than that, he learned to need it. The silence he'd once protected now felt wrong when it occasionally appeared, empty instead of peaceful. One evening in October, he found Mara reviewing ledgers at the kitchen table while Finn colored nearby and Josie read aloud to her younger brother. "We need more space," Mara said without looking up. "The network's getting too big to manage from one kitchen table. We could add a room to the house or convert part of the barn. Or we could acknowledge this has become bigger than one ranch operation and build proper headquarters, central office, storage facility, meeting space." She looked up. "I've been talking with Ben and the others. They'd contribute labor and materials if we organize it." "You're talking about permanent infrastructure for the cooperative. I'm talking about making official what's already functioning. We've proven the model works. Time to build something lasting." She paused. "Unless you want to keep it small and temporary?" "Nothing about this feels temporary anymore." Elias looked around the kitchen, at children doing homework, at ledgers tracking thousands of dollars in trade goods, at the life that had replaced isolation. "Build what you need. I'm done pretending this is just temporary arrangement. Construction on the cooperative headquarters began in spring. It went up fast with so many hands helping, a large building that could host meetings, store records, coordinate complex trades. Mara designed the layout with typical efficiency, creating space that served current needs while allowing future expansion. The day they moved operations from the kitchen table to actual office, Josie made a show of ceremonially clearing the table. "This space is officially returned to being a kitchen," she announced. "No more trade ledgers at dinner." "What will we talk about instead?" Finn asked. "Literally anything else," Caleb said. "Normal family stuff." "What's normal family stuff?" Finn looked genuinely confused. The question hung there, poignant and revealing. None of them had experienced normal in years. They'd lived through death, debt, running, fighting. Quiet domestic life was foreign territory. "I guess we figure it out together," Mara said softly. "Learn what normal looks like for us." Normal turned out to involve arguments about whose turn it was to feed chickens, debates over whether Marshall needed a wooden companion horse, and regular dinners that sometimes ran late because someone started telling stories and nobody wanted to interrupt. Normal meant Caleb teaching Elias to carve wood, while they discussed ranch management and future plans. Normal meant Josie challenging Mara's bookkeeping methods with ideas she'd developed herself. Normal meant Finn falling asleep during supper because he'd spent all day helping with chores he was still too small to handle efficiently. Normal meant Elias waking up to coffee he hadn't made, and children who called him by name but treated him like family. It meant Mara discussing business as equal partner, arguing when they disagreed, trusting him with everything that mattered. 1 year after the wedding, the territorial governor visited Black Hollow to officially recognize the rancher cooperative as legally incorporated entity. The ceremony involved speeches Elias endured rather than enjoyed, but the outcome mattered: legal protection, formal structure, recognition that their model worked. "You've created something remarkable here," the governor said during informal dinner after the ceremony. "Economic cooperation on this scale is rare in the territories. You're proof it's possible." "We had strong motivation," Mara said. "Pike forced us to work together. We discovered we preferred it to working alone. Still, organization like this requires leadership, someone to coordinate, mediate, maintain vision." The governor looked at her. "You've done that remarkably well, Mrs. Mercer. Ever considered politics?" Mara laughed. "I have 3 children and a husband who barely tolerates the social interaction we already have. Politics seems like poor fit. Pity. Territory needs people who can build coalitions and solve problems creatively." The governor turned to Elias. "What about you? Regional representative positions opening up. Could use someone with your reputation." "My reputation as hermit who hated visitors?" "Your reputation as man who stood against corruption when everyone else was too scared. That carries weight." Elias shook his head. "I'm a rancher, not a politician. I'll leave governing to people who enjoy talking." After the governor left, Mara found Elias on the porch. "You could have said yes," she said. "Representative position would give you influence, platform to protect what we've built." "I don't want influence. I want to raise cattle, help manage the cooperative, and watch those children grow up." He looked at her. "Is that selfish? Choosing small life when I could supposedly impact larger issues?" "It's not selfish to know what you want. Not everyone's meant for politics or power. Some people are meant to build quietly, maintain steadily, protect what matters without needing recognition." She leaned against him. "You've already changed everything that matters to me. That's enough impact for any life." 2 years became 3. The cooperative thrived, expanding to include nearly every rancher in the territory. The model they'd created, barter-based trade, mutual support, coordinated sales, spread to other regions. People came from distant settlements to study how Black Hollow had organized resistance into functional economy. Mara handled most of the teaching, explaining systems she'd developed with pragmatic clarity. She'd become known throughout the territory as the architect of successful cooperative model. Universities invited her to speak. Business organizations requested consultations. She declined most invitations, preferring to stay close to home. "I spent enough years running," she told Elias when he questioned whether she was passing up opportunities. "Now I want to stay still, build depth instead of breadth." The children grew. Caleb turned 16 and started taking on serious ranch responsibility, managing entire operations while Elias handled cooperative business. His carpentry skills developed into genuine craftsmanship. He built furniture that people commissioned, developing side business that supplemented ranch income. Josie at 13 showed mathematical talent that exceeded bookkeeping. She solved complex problems instinctively, saw patterns others missed. Tom Brennan started bringing her puzzles and equations to solve for entertainment. She usually solved them within hours. Finn turned 8, still carrying Marshall everywhere, though the wooden horse now led an entire cavalry of carved animals Caleb made. The boy remained curious, fearless, certain that any problem could be solved with enough imagination and stubborn persistence. One evening, Elias found himself on the porch watching sunset paint the rebuilt barn gold and orange. Cattle grazed in distant pastures. Chickens scratched in the yard. Smoke rose from the cooperative headquarters where late meeting was running long. Finn appeared beside him, Marshall in hand. "Can I ask you something?" the boy said. "Always." "Are you my father now?" The question came so simply, so directly, that Elias felt his breath catch. He'd known it would come eventually. Caleb had asked in his own way. Josie had never needed to ask. She'd decided on her own terms. But Finn wanted explicit answer. "What does Marshall think?" Elias asked, buying time. Finn held up the wooden horse, examining it seriously. "Marshall says you act like a father. You teach us things and protect us, and get mad when we do dangerous stuff. But he says maybe you don't want to be called that because we already had a father." "You did have a father, Daniel Quinn. He loved you very much." "I don't remember him much. Just pieces. His laugh, the way he smelled like tobacco." Finn looked up with wide, honest eyes. "Is it bad that I don't remember more?" "No. You were small when he died. Remembering pieces is normal." Caleb remembers lots. He tells stories about Papa sometimes. They sound nice. Finn paused. "But you're the one who's here. You're the one who taught me to ride and fix fences and not be scared of storms. Doesn't that make you my father too?" Elias knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "Having two fathers isn't bad. One who gave you life and loved you when he was alive. One who's here now trying his best to raise you right. Both can matter." "So you are my father?" "If you want me to be, then yes, I'm your father." Saying it out loud felt monumental. "And you're my son. You and Caleb and Josie, my children, even if you didn't start that way." Finn threw his arms around Elias's neck, hugging tight. Marshall was right. He's always right about important things. Marshall's a wise sheriff. Later, after Finn went to bed, Elias told Mara about the conversation. "He's been building up to that question for months," she said. "Asking Margaret, asking Tom, asking everyone except you. Needed to be sure of the answer before risking asking directly. I should have said it earlier, made it clear where we all stood. You showed it through action. Words just made it official." She took his hand. "Thank you for being what they needed, what we all needed. I'm not good at this. At being a father, a husband, part of a community. I spent too many years alone. You're better at it than you think. You listen, you protect, you show up consistently. That's what matters. Not perfection, presence." 4 years after Mara and the children arrived on that frozen February afternoon, Elias stood in the ranch yard watching Caleb demonstrate furniture techniques to younger apprentices. The boy, now 18, had developed enough reputation that other ranchers sent their children to learn from him. Josie managed the cooperative's complex accounting, handling operations that would challenge people twice her age. At 15, she'd already received scholarship offers from Eastern colleges interested in her mathematical abilities. Finn worked alongside Elias on daily ranch chores, asking constant questions and treating every task like adventure. Marshall still accompanied him everywhere, now joined by wooden cavalry Caleb had carved over years. The ranch that had once echoed with loneliness now bustled with constant activity. The cooperative brought regular visitors. The children brought noise and chaos. Mara brought organization and purpose. Elias had gone from surviving alone to living surrounded by people. The change should have overwhelmed him. Instead, it felt like waking up after long sleep. One evening in late summer, the whole family gathered for dinner, increasingly rare as children developed separate activities and interests. Josie discussed her scholarship offers. Caleb mentioned possibly opening dedicated furniture workshop. Finn announced Marshall had been promoted to general and needed expanded cavalry. Mara listened to all of it while serving food, interjecting questions and guidance, managing conversation like she managed everything. with competent grace. Watching them, Elias felt something settle inside him. This was what Pike had tried to destroy. This was what they'd fought to protect. Not property or business or pride. This. Family, community, life built deliberately instead of endured passively. After the children dispersed to evening activities, Mara found Elias on the porch. "You're thinking," she said, "just remembering." "Remembering what?" "The day you arrived. How badly I wanted to send you away. How convinced I was that letting you stay would ruin everything." He looked at her. "I was right, actually. It did ruin everything. Ruined my isolation, my silence, my carefully controlled routine. Sounds terrible. It was the best mistake I ever made." He pulled her close. "Thank you for not leaving when I was an ass about you staying. Thank you for not being so much of an ass that leaving became necessary." She smiled. "We've built something good here. Something that matters." "We have." They stood together watching stars emerge over Wyoming territory, over the ranch that had transformed from fortress into home, over the life they'd chosen despite every reason to choose otherwise. 5 years. That's what it had taken to go from isolated rancher and desperate widow to husband and wife, father and mother, partners in every sense that mattered. 5 years of fighting Pike, building cooperative, raising children, learning to trust again. Not perfect years. There had been arguments, setbacks, moments of doubt. Caleb still struggled with trusting authority figures. Josie sometimes withdrew into mathematics to avoid emotional complexity. Finn had nightmares about the barn burning. Mara occasionally woke in panic, convinced Pike had returned. Elias still preferred solitude sometimes, still got overwhelmed by constant people and noise, still retreated to remote fence lines to work alone. But imperfection didn't mean failure. It meant human, real, honest about struggles while choosing to keep building anyway. The final piece came on a crisp October morning when Finn burst into the house announcing a wagon was coming up the ridge road. "More visitors for the cooperative, probably," Mara said, barely looking up from her work. But something in Finn's voice made Elias move to the window. The wagon looked familiar, patched canvas, wobbling wheel, the kind of desperate conveyance that carried people who'd run out of options. A woman climbed down, helping 2 small children to the ground. She approached slowly, respectfully, stopping at the invisible line that marked property boundary. Elias walked out to meet her, aware of Mara following. "Help you?" he called. "Looking for work," the woman said. Her voice carried exhaustion and determination in equal measure. "Heard there was a cooperative here, that the Mercers might know someone hiring." "What kind of work?" "Anything. Cooking, cleaning, ranch labor. I'm not particular." She glanced back at her children. "We need shelter and steady pay. Willing to work hard for both." Elias looked at this woman and her desperate situation and saw Mara 5 years ago. Saw himself in the choice approaching, send them away or take a risk on strangers. "The cooperative usually needs people," he said, "but positions are formal. Take time to arrange properly." The woman's shoulders slumped. "I understand. Could you point me toward—" "However," Elias continued, "my brother-in-law Ben Hollister mentioned needing help at his place. Wife's expecting their 4th child, could use extra hands. Pays fair, includes housing." "Your brother-in-law?" "Married my wife's sister. Good man, fair employer, won't mistreat you or the children." Elias gestured toward the barn where Caleb was working. "My son can ride with you to their place, make introductions. That acceptable?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "More than acceptable. Thank you." After Caleb left with the woman and her children, Mara turned to Elias. "Ben isn't your brother-in-law. Margaret's not my sister." "They're close enough. And that woman needed help same as you did 5 years ago. Seemed right to pay it forward." "You've gotten soft, Elias Mercer." "I've gotten smart. Learned that helping people when they need it comes back around. Besides, Ben actually did mention needing help last week." Mara kissed him. Soft. Definitely soft. "Maybe. But happy. I'll take soft and happy over hard and lonely." The years continued rolling forward. The cooperative evolved, the children grew, the ranch prospered. Elias never became comfortable with large gatherings or comfortable in crowds, but he learned to navigate them. Mara never stopped organizing chaos into order, but she learned to let some things stay chaotic. The children found their paths. Caleb's furniture business thrived. Josie accepted scholarship to Eastern College with promise to return and apply her mathematical skills to cooperative operations. Finn declared intention to become territorial marshal like the man who'd arrested Pike, convinced justice was calling worth pursuing. And through it all, the ranch remained home. Not perfect home. It carried scars from the barn fire, memories of Pike's violence, echoes of desperate times. But home nonetheless. Built deliberately by people who'd chosen each other despite every reason to choose otherwise. 10 years after that first desperate wagon climbed the ridge, Elias stood in the same spot watching another sunset paint the sky gold and orange. But now he wasn't alone. Mara stood beside him. The children, grown but still coming home regularly, filled the house with voices and laughter. The cooperative building buzzed with evening meeting. The ranch yard echoed with activity. Life had happened. Messy, complicated, imperfect life full of arguments and reconciliations, setbacks and victories, ordinary days and extraordinary moments. And Elias Mercer, who'd once believed isolation was strength and silence was safety, discovered something better. Connection was strength. Community was safety. And family, chosen deliberately, built carefully, defended fiercely, was worth every risk he'd taken to protect it. The notice he'd posted so many years ago had asked for a cook who could endure solitude. What had arrived instead was a woman who'd taught him solitude was just another word for fear, and endurance mattered less than courage to try something different. They'd built this together, not perfectly, not smoothly, but successfully in ways that mattered most. And if Elias had learned anything in 45 years of stubborn survival followed by 10 years of deliberate living, it was this. The things worth having were usually the things you didn't know you needed until they showed up uninvited and refused to leave. Mara and her children had shown up uninvited. He'd built his entire life around making sure they never left. And every single day since, he'd been grateful for the courage to choose differently than fear suggested. That was the lesson, he supposed. Fear suggested isolation. Courage built family, and wisdom meant knowing the difference.